Chapter 800. Subdue the dragon's might is actually so strong. Upon hearing Xiao Hei's words, Zhuowen's heart was filled with excitement. Just a partial realization already possessed such terrifying power. What would happen if Xiao Hei fully realized? Wouldn't that be heaven-defying? Also, your supreme dragon cauldron is not a useless armor soul. It's just that it's too dilapidated now, so it looks useless. Xiao Hei suddenly pointed at the jade cauldron not far away. Zhuowen asked doubtfully, "What's so good about this jade cauldron? I really can't see what special abilities he has." The supreme dragon cauldron is a treasure of heaven and earth, and it is also the nemesis of the dragon race. It has the power to suppress 10,000 dragons. Your supreme dragon cauldron can control true dragons for your use. Don't you think it's amazing? Xiao Hei said calmly. It is indeed powerful, but where did the true dragon come from? Also, this jade cauldron is too shabby. It doesn't look like a treasure at all. Zhuowen was still skeptical. Xiao Hei shook its head, feeling somewhat disappointed. Soon after, it pointed its little claw at the 81 strands of dragon might in the sea of lava and said, "Although the supreme dragon cauldron is much more damaged, suppressing those tiny strands of dragon might is not a problem. By relying on this supreme dragon cauldron, you can completely subdue those 81 strands of dragon might for your own use. Don't underestimate that dragon's might. After all, it's the dragon's might released by a true dragon when it was still alive. It's extremely powerful," Xiao Hei said calmly. "Oh, you're saying that this broken cauldron can subdue the 81 terrifying dragon auras?" Zhuowen's eyes lit up, and he asked with some doubt. "You'll know once you try." Xiao Hei did not say much. After peeling herself off from Zhuowen's body, she reverted back to Xiao Hei's dog form. She sat on Zhuowen's shoulder with a look that said, "Believe it or not, it's up to you. Let's give it a try." Although he was skeptical, Zhuowen was also rather eager for those 81 strands of dragon might. He could feel the powerful might of those dragon might. If he could subdue them for his own use, it would definitely be of great benefit. With a stomp of his feet, Zhuowen carried the broken jade cauldron in his right hand, and flew towards the sea of lava like a giant rock. Awoo! Zhuowen's arrival immediately attracted the attention of the 81 dragon mights not far away. However, to Zhuowen's surprise, these dragon mights merely glanced at Zhuowen lazily and ignored him. Awoo! It just so happens that I can try to see if this supreme dragon cauldron can subdue the dragon might. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled up as he looked at the dragon aura that didn't seem to care. He suddenly arrived above the nearest dragon aura. Awoo! The dragon's enormous eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen. It suddenly swung its tail, which was as huge as a pillar that supported the heavens. It swept towards Zhuowen with great force. Zhuowen was not afraid. He held the jade cauldron in his right hand and blocked it in front of him. At the same time, he had already put up layers of protection around his body. He was already prepared to take the attack if the jade cauldron was unable to subdue the dragon might. Boom! When the dragon's tail came in contact with the jade cauldron, the dragon's might revealed a look of fear and cried out repeatedly. A terrifying suction force swept out from the jade cauldron and instantly swept the dragon's might in. The dragon's might wanted to escape, but unfortunately, the suction force was too terrifying. The more the dragon's might struggled, the stronger the suction force became. Awoo! In the end, Zhuowen was shocked to find that the dragon's might below was completely sucked into the jade cauldron without any resistance. It was sucked in so easily. Is this jade cauldron actually so powerful? Zhuowen was stunned as he looked at the dragon's might that was instantly sucked in. Whoosh! A black light swept over and turned into Xiao Hei's appearance. Xiao Hei slowly patted Zhuowen's shoulder and said with a smile, "Now you know how powerful this supreme dragon cauldron is. With this supreme dragon cauldron, you can easily subdue the dragon's might and make it fight for you." Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He finally understood what Xiao Hei meant. The supreme dragon cauldron was not an offensive treasure, but more like an auxiliary treasure. Moreover, it was extremely restraining against the dragon clan. With the supreme dragon cauldron, he could use it to subdue the dragon clan and fight for him. Moreover, there seemed to be no limit to the number of dragons. However, What made Zhuowen a little helpless was that the Dragon Clan had disappeared a long time ago. It was really difficult to subdue the Dragon Clan. However, Zhuowen also knew that the current Supreme Dragon Cauldron was too broken. If he encountered the Dragon Clan, it would not be of much use. Although it is a little unrealistic to subdue the Dragon Clan, it is still possible to subdue the dragon's might. As he spoke, Zhuowen stared at the remaining dragon's might in front of him. His eyes were full of desire. If he could subdue all of these dragons' might, it would be of great help to him. Awoo! Zhuowen instantly subdued a dragon's might. It was as if he had poked a hornet's nest. The remaining dragons' might roared angrily and immediately rushed towards Zhuowen. The human in front of them was too abominable. They did not provoke this person, but this person dared to touch their companion. This was really unforgivable. Come on! Zhuowen shouted. With the jade cauldron in his left hand and the bone spear in his right hand, he rushed towards the remaining dragon's might like the wind. Bang! A huge dragon's tail smashed towards him, but Zhuowen was not afraid at all. He held the jade cauldron in his left hand and placed it in front of him. A terrifying suction force came from the jade cauldron. The dragon's might screamed and was directly sucked into the jade cauldron. These dragons' might were indeed extremely terrifying. If it were not for the Supreme Dragon Cauldron, even if Zhuowen had broken through to the Xuanzuan realm, he would be courting death if he wanted to deal with these dragons' might. Unfortunately, with the powerful suppressive effect of the Supreme Dragon Cauldron, the dragon's might could only be exerted by about 10%. In front of Zhuowen now, it was simply being abused. In less than half an hour, the remaining dragon's might had been sucked into the Supreme Dragon Cauldron by Zhuowen. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen returned to the rock at the edge of the magma sea. Dragon roars were constantly coming out from the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. The 81 dragons' might that had been subdued were constantly struggling to get out of the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. Unfortunately, it was simply a waste of effort. These dragons' might are wild and untamed. I'm afraid it will take a lot of time to completely refine it and let you use it, Xiao Hei said faintly as she stared at the Supreme Dragon Cauldron that was constantly shaking. Zhuowen nodded. He also knew that it was not that easy to completely tame these dragons' might. However, as long as he spent some time, the dragon's might would naturally be completely used by him. In addition to the function of subduing the Dragon Clan, your Supreme Dragon Cauldron also contains an extremely rich dragon aura. The dragon aura has immeasurable benefits to these dragons' might. If you cultivate it well, the strength of these dragons' might will continue to increase. It will also be of great help to you in the future. Xiao Hei's words surprised Zhuowen. Naturally, Zhuowen knew about the dragon aura in the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. When he was cultivating the immemorial dragon raw fist, he had relied on the dragon aura of the five-clawed golden dragon in the jade cauldron to cultivate it to perfection. I didn't expect the dragon aura in the jade cauldron to have such a benefit, Zhuowen muttered. Alright, the dragon's might has been completely subdued by you. Moreover, you have also successfully broken through to the Xuanzuan realm. Then, prepare to go down to the bottom of the magma sea to take a look. There will definitely be a real dragon's corpse down there. That's good stuff. At this point, Xiao Hei rubbed her hands excitedly, looking like a moneygrubber. A real dragon's corpse. I'll go down and take a look. Zhuowen's eyes were also filled with anticipation. A real dragon's corpse was a powerful existence that he had never seen before. Today, he might have the chance to see it once. Although it was just a corpse, it was still extremely fresh for Zhuowen. Plop! Without the slightest hesitation, Zhuowen suddenly dove into the ocean of lava. At the same time that he dove into the ocean of lava, Zhuowen executed the rebirth of the Grand Sun to the limit. Moreover, he even summoned the Infinity Sword formation to revolve around his body, and it formed an impenetrable wall that was impregnable. What a high temperature! The moment Zhuowen dived into the magma sea, he felt an extremely terrifying temperature eroding towards him. Fortunately, he had 2 layers of protection. Coupled with his strong physical body, he didn't feel the slightest bit of discomfort. During the process of diving, Zhuowen's sharp senses kept probing his surroundings, just in case. This magma sea covered a large area. Zhuowen didn't believe that there wouldn't be any danger in this magma sea. Therefore, he was extremely cautious. Time passed by minute. Soon, Zhuowen had already dived a few hundred meters, but he still hadn't reached the bottom. Zhuowen was still calm as he slowly dived. 4 hours later, Zhuowen had already dived nearly 1,000 meters, but he still hadn't reached the bottom. He couldn't help but frown. What a deep magma sea. I've already dived nearly 1,000 meters, but I still haven't reached the bottom. Muttering to himself, Zhuowen continued diving. He also discovered that the deeper he dived, the more terrifying the temperature of the magma became. Kid. Something is approaching, and it's moving very fast. Suddenly, Xiao Hei's voice rang out, startling Zhuowen. His gaze became even more vigilant, and at the same time, he was constantly paying attention to the movements around him. After 10 breaths, Zhuowen sensed a mysterious creature dozens of meters away. It was like an arrow that had been released from a bow. Its speed was unbelievably fast. Bang! In an instant, the mysterious creature collided with the Greater Infinity Sword Formation. Immediately, the huge Greater Infinity Sword Formation trembled violently, and the brilliance on its surface gradually dimmed. The Greater Infinity Sword Formation was originally resisting the high temperature of the surrounding magma, but it was already on the verge of collapse. Now, with the impact of the mysterious creature, the situation of the Greater Infinity Sword Formation became even worse. What kind of creature is attacking me? Zhuowen turned around and looked behind him. He immediately saw the true appearance of the mysterious creature. It was a huge python, and the strange thing was that this python had 3 heads. At this moment, its 6 triangular eyes were constantly staring at Zhuowen. Chapter 801. Blue Dragon Palace. The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake was a powerful meta beast. It was said that it was born with the strength of an ultimate king realm beast. Once it reached maturity, it would reach the peak of the ultimate king realm beast. The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake in front of him was undoubtedly a mature 3-headed flaming spiritual snake. Its strength should be at the peak of the ultimate king realm. Logically speaking, a 3-headed flaming spiritual snake with such strength would not pose much of a threat to Zhuowen. Unfortunately, the 3-headed flaming spiritual snake was an indigenous creature of the magma sea. Although it was not strong, it had the geographical advantage and its speed was much more terrifying. Swoosh! The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake stared coldly at Zhuowen. It spat out its tongue as if it was staring at its beloved prey. I'm afraid you will regret treating me as your prey. Zhuowen snorted and stomped his feet in the magma. With the help of the strong buoyancy, he quickly flew towards the 3-headed flaming spiritual snake. The terrifying strength even stirred the surrounding magma into a terrifying whirlpool. The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake's eyes flickered and revealed a rare look of fear. It could feel that the human in front of it was extremely powerful, so it did not plan to meet force with force. Swoosh! In an instant, the 3-headed flaming spirit serpent turned into a shadow and dodged Zhuowen's attack. With a hissing sound, it bombarded Zhuowen's greater limitless sword formation from the side. Bang! The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake's attack actually caused Zhuowen's body to sway. He could not help but fly to the side. The ultimate sword formation finally dimmed under this attack. It disintegrated into countless cold lights and entered Zhuowen's spiritual ring. This damned beast, it's actually so agile. With a stomp of his feet, Zhuowen barely stabilized his body. His gaze was extremely gloomy. In the magma sea, his movements were greatly hindered. The 3-headed flaming spiritual snake's speed was too fast. It was impossible for him to dodge the latter's attack. Boom! Another sound of water splashing was heard. The 3-headed flame spirit serpent launched another surprise attack. Zhuowen only felt a huge force coming from behind him. His whole body was hit and he staggered. When he turned around, he saw the 3-headed flaming spirit serpent staring at him in confusion. The flaming spirit serpent had used all of its strength just now, thinking that it could definitely kill the human in front of it. However, It did not realize that the human's body was so tough that it could not break through the latter's physical defense. While the flame spirit serpent was in a daze, a dazzling golden arm suddenly stretched out and pinched the flame spirit serpent's tail. Hiss! The flame spirit serpent immediately cried out in fear when its tail was pinched. The real dragon's body size is basically measured in units of thousands of feet. The stronger the strength, the more terrifying the real dragon's body size is. Some real dragons that have cultivated to become spirits can even reach a size of close to 10,000 feet. It's extremely terrifying. Xiao Hei stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and rolled her eyes at Zhuowen in disdain. She thought that Zhuowen was making a fuss over nothing. Kid, look at the forehead of the real dragon's corpse. There seems to be something there. Xiao Hei suddenly extended her small claw and pointed at the bone dragon's forehead. Following Xiao Hei's little claw, Zhuowen's gaze landed on the space between the bone dragon's eyebrows. He was immediately stunned because there was actually a rather large cave between the bone dragon's eyebrows, and above the cave were 3 bold and forceful words. Azure Dragon Hall? Zhuowen murmured to himself as a gleam of light erupted from his eyes. Did these 3 words mean that there was a hall called the Azure Dragon Hall in the depths of the bone dragon's forehead? Just who was it that dug a hole in the bone dragon's forehead and built this so-called Azure Dragon Hall? Zhuowen asked in doubt. Xiao Hei's gaze became rather stern. She said, the bodies of true dragons are extremely tough. Emperors are unable to leave behind any imprints on the bone dragon's corpse, yet this person was able to dig a hole in the bone dragon's forehead. Only a saint can do that. What? Xiao Hei, you mean to say that the one who built this so-called Azure Dragon Hall is a saint? Zhuowen asked in surprise. It's very likely. The owner of this Azure Dragon Hall is very likely a saint, and an extremely powerful one at that. Xiao Hei's voice became grave. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as he muttered to himself, in other words, this true dragon was killed by that saint. Isn't that too powerful? He can even kill a true dragon? Suddenly, Xiao Hei sneered and said indifferently, Kid, you're thinking too much. It's impossible for a mere saint to have the ability to kill a true dragon because even the weakest true dragon is no weaker than a saint, and the strongest true dragon is already comparable to a god-rank powerhouse. This true dragon's corpse was extremely powerful when it was alive. Although its strength couldn't compare to a god-rank powerhouse, it was already hard to find a match among saints. It's impossible for a mere saint to kill this true dragon. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, this true dragon's corpse should be an azure dragon. The azure dragon is an extremely terrifying dragon race. In front of it, even a saint might not be its match. Hearing this, the shock in Zhuowen's eyes became even more intense. This azure dragon was so terrifying. Even a saint might not be a match for it, then just how terrifying was this azure dragon? Then what's going on with this Azure Dragon Hall? Since the Azure Dragon was so terrifying, why would a saint open up a cave-in between its eyebrows and build the Azure Dragon Hall? Hee. The owner of the Azure Dragon Hall must have found the Azure Dragon's corpse and then built a cave-in between the Azure Dragon's eyebrows. However, the owner of the Azure Dragon Hall should also be an extraordinary figure. He dared to build a cave in the Azure Dragon's corpse. His courage is outstanding, and his strength is definitely not weak. Otherwise, it would be impossible for this Azure Dragon Hall to not be coveted by others. At this point, Xiao Hei's eyes revealed a rare look of contemplation. Then let's enter the Azure Dragon Hall and take a look. After all, this is a cave opened up by a saint. Perhaps there are many good things inside. At this point, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with a blazing light. This was a saint's cave. No matter what, the things inside would not be bad. Let's go in and take a look. However, you need to be careful. After all, a saint's cave is not so easy to break into. I'm afraid there will be many dangers inside, Xiao Hei reminded. Nodding his head, Zhuowen was about to rush towards the Azure Dragon Hall in the sky when a sharp sound of something breaking through the air came from behind, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. With a shift of his feet, he instantly moved several feet to the side. Sizzle. 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 The place where Zhuowen was just now was suddenly hit by a purple liquid. It actually emitted a terrifying corrosive sound. In an instant, That place was actually corroded into a deep pit that was several feet deep. Who is it? Turning around abruptly, Zhuowen's eyes gradually turned cold. This purple venom seemed to be very toxic. If he were to be directly hit by it, he would probably be in an extremely sorry state. Dozens of meters behind him, there was an extremely large three-headed flaming spirit serpent. It was spitting out its tongue and staring coldly at Zhuowen. Millimeter? Another three-headed flaming spirit serpent? Looking at the three-headed flaming spirit serpent dozens of meters away, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. However, the three-headed flaming spirit serpent in front of him was several times larger than the three-headed flaming spirit serpent that he had just killed. Its body was also much stronger. Even the aura on its body was much more terrifying. This is probably the three-headed flaming spirit serpent king. Kid, you have to be careful, Xiaohei suddenly said. It's the serpent king? Then what you mean is... Zhuowen's pupils shrank slightly as an ominous premonition flashed in his heart. He knew that the three-headed flaming spirit serpent was a type of meta beast that lived in groups. If the three-headed flaming spirit serpent king existed, then the other three-headed flaming spirit serpents would not be far away. Chapter 802. Serpent. Looking at the three-headed flaming spiritual serpents that appeared behind the serpent king, Zhuowen's eyes were extremely gloomy. He made a rough estimate and realized that there were 3 digits of three-headed flaming spiritual serpents in front of him. Human. You are bold to kill my people. You are courting death. A rather immature voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen could not help but narrow his eyes as he stared at the Snake King in the lead. He knew that the owner of the voice should be the Snake King. However, he was puzzled. Isn't the Serpent King an adult? Why is its voice so childish, as though it is an infant? It was your people who attacked me first. I was only retaliating. Although there are many of you, it is impossible for you to kill me. I advise you to retreat. Otherwise, it will be too late for regrets. Zhuowen shook his head and transmitted his voice to the Serpent King. Although there were many three-headed flaming spiritual serpents, it was a pity that Zhuowen's physical body was so terrifying that the flaming spiritual serpents did not pose much of a threat to him. Even though the flaming spiritual serpent king had the strongest aura and its strength should be around the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm, such strength did not pose much of a threat to Zhuowen. You want us to retreat? Human, you are too arrogant and ignorant. Today, I will show you the terror of the flaming spiritual serpents. Don't beg for mercy when you die because it will be useless. After the three-headed flaming spiritual serpent king finished its sentence, it shrieked. Instantly, the countless flaming spiritual serpents behind it shrieked as well. Soon after, the sound of the air breaking was heard and they plunged towards Zhuowen. In that case, I will not be courteous. Seeing that the three-headed flaming spiritual serpent king was so stubborn, Zhuowen did not want to say anything more. He stomped his feet and displayed the nirvana of the sun. He transformed into a 4-headed, 8-armed serpent king with 8 spears and charged forward fearlessly. Puff, puff. 8 cold lights flashed past. Instantly, 8 three-headed flaming spiritual serpents turned into a cloud of blood and died a violent death. This is just the beginning. Since you are willing to die, I, Zhuowen, will accompany you to the end. With a cold smile, Zhuowen waved his spear again and displayed the spear essence of perfection. Spear essence of flaming spiritual serpents surrounded him. Countless blue crystals surrounded him were like the toughest ice. As soon as the spear intent domain appeared, a terrifying explosion followed. Instantly, the dozens of 3-headed flaming spirit serpents that were charging at the front exploded into a bloody mist before they could even make a sound. A figure suddenly rushed out from the blood mist. He brandished his spear and shot out countless cold lights. The flame spirit serpents that were charging forward were basically slaughtered one-sidedly. In flaming spiritual serpent spiritual, in the spiritual serpent blood spiritual serpents serpent demon serpents spiritual serpents. Spiritual king spiritual serpents. Flaming spiritual serpents. Flaming of serpents spiritual serpents, the serpents in. Kill this human. The serpent king shrieked again. Although many of the remaining flaming spiritual serpents were afraid, they had no choice but to charge forward and fight under the Serpent King's tyrannical power. Zhuo Wen was not afraid at all. He shouted in a low voice, "A 1,000 feet tall body." As he spoke, his body rose from the ground and actually transformed into a 300-meter tall figure. He was like a giant mountain that was as tall as the sky. His feet suddenly stomped on the ground, causing the entire ground to tremble violently. "All of you, die." As Zhuowen spoke, his 8 spears smashed down together. The terrifying power swept out, causing the surrounding magma to tumble violently. It was as if the entire magma field was going to be turned upside down. Puff! Instantly, the flame spirit serpents that were charging over were all turned into clouds of blood mist. Instantly, there were only a dozen or so flame spirit serpents left. It looked like there were very few of them left. Hiss hiss hiss. The remaining dozen flaming spiritual serpents let out sorrowful cries. Their eyes were filled with fear. They swung their tails and fled. The human in front of them was too terrifying. They had been surrounded by so many flaming spiritual serpents, but they were all killed in an instant. It was too terrifying. The Serpent King's face changed drastically. Its body flashed and it wanted to escape. Zhuowen's power made its heart tremble and fear. "You want to leave? You'd better stay here," Zhuowen shouted. He stomped his feet and instantly blocked the Serpent King's path. He stretched out his golden arm and grabbed the Serpent King. Hiss hiss hiss. The Serpent King shrieked and its 3 heads spat out purplish-black venom. It wanted to completely corrode Zhuowen's arm. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's golden arm was as strong as steel. Although the purplish venom was strong, it had no effect on Zhuowen's arm. With a slap of his right hand, the purplish venom was blown away. Zhuowen pressed down on the Serpent King without hesitation. He immediately grabbed the 3 heads of the Serpent King and stared coldly at the latter. "Human warrior, let me go, I won't provoke you in the future." The Serpent King was finally afraid and quickly hissed. However, Zhuowen sneered and said, "Towards those who want to kill me, I have always chosen to return an eye for an eye. Now, you can leave your last words. You, human, you can't kill me. If you kill me, you will regret it. I am a soaring serpent." Before the Serpent King could finish speaking, Zhuowen's right hand suddenly exerted force and instantly crushed the Serpent King's body, turning it into a cloud of rolling blood mist. "I don't care what you are. If you provoke me, Zhuowen, the outcome will be the same." After saying this indifferently, Zhuowen's huge body slowly descended and finally turned into the size of a normal person. With a stomp of his foot, his entire body rushed towards the true dragon's corpse in the valley. To him, the 3-headed flaming spiritual Serpent King was just an insignificant interlude. Right now, his main focus was on the Azure Dragon Palace. Whoosh! When he arrived at the space between the Bone Dragon's eyebrows, Zhuowen discovered that the cave in front of him was actually so huge. It was 100 feet tall and 30 feet wide. Especially the 3 large words Azure Dragon Palace above the cave, it was vigorous and powerful, emitting a powerful aura. "I wonder what exactly exists in this Azure Dragon Palace." A fiery gaze appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. With a stomp of his foot, he wanted to directly enter the cave. Deng deng deng. The instant Zhuowen approached the cave, a transparent light barrier appeared on the surface of the cave, causing Zhuowen to hit a wall. After stabilizing his body, Zhuowen's gaze converged on the light barrier that appeared out of nowhere and said, "This is a restriction?" Whoosh! Xiao Hei also came out at this moment and flew in front of the restriction. Her black eyes were filled with a trace of seriousness as she said, "Kid, this restriction is not simple. Do you have a way to deal with it?" Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he asked. Zhuowen was a complete novice when it came to formations and restrictions. He did not know anything about them, so he could only leave it to Xiao Hei to deal with. "I do, but it will take a lot of time." Xiao Hei nodded and said solemnly. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded and said, "Then you go ahead and study it first. I can use this time to properly consolidate the Xuanzuan realm. After all, I've only just advanced to Mystique Venerable rank." With that, Zhuowen silently sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. He began to silently cultivate and recuperate, not disturbing Xiao Hei when she was studying the restriction. The terrain in the northern polar region of the magma sea was extremely strange. There was a huge abyss there, and in the depths of the abyss, there was a huge suction force that caused the magma above the abyss to churn wantonly, forming a terrifying whirlpool. All of a sudden, the vortex above the abyss came to a strange stop. Then, a furious and terrifying voice came from the depths of the abyss. It was like a rumbling thunderclap. "Who is it? Who dares to kill my bloodline?" Rumble. A huge and terrifying figure that was close to 10,000 feet tall rushed out of the abyss, sweeping up a torrent of magma. Then, this huge figure rushed toward the center of the magma sea. In the valley, Zhuowen silently sat cross-legged and slowly opened his eyes. There was a gleam of joy in his eyes. He had been sitting here for half a day, relying on the rich draconic energy here to completely consolidate the Xuanzuan realm. "Xiao Hei, are you not done yet?" Zhuowen could not help but ask when he turned his head and saw that Xiao Hei was still focused on studying the restriction outside the cave. "It's almost done. This forbidden method is quite brilliant, and there are quite a few traps buried inside, causing this dragon lord to make a few mistakes. But now that I've found the right method, it should be done soon." Xiao Hei replied casually. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He was not in a hurry. After all, the Azure Dragon Hall was right in front of him. Sooner or later, he would break in. However, for some reason, his right eyelid had been twitching non-stop since just now, as if an unknown danger was constantly approaching him. "Is it my imagination?" Zhuowen frowned and muttered to himself. Rumble. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the entire valley. The ground of the valley began to crack under the violent tremor. Extremely ferocious cracks appeared on the ground. "What's going on?" Zhuowen suddenly stood up, and his eyes were filled with surprise and bewilderment. This sudden vibration was too strange. Following that, Zhuowen discovered that a huge figure was slowly appearing above the valley. This huge figure was nearly 3,000 meters tall, almost covering the sky and covering the sun. Looking at the huge figure that had suddenly appeared in front of him, Zhuowen's pupils constricted and his mouth opened slightly. A strong sense of danger surfaced in his heart. The huge figure that appeared above the valley had a huge snake's body that was nearly 3,000 meters long. Its green scales flickered with a terrifying cold light. What was even stranger was that on the back of this huge snake, there was actually a pair of flame wings that were thousands of meters long. They looked dazzling and brilliant. When he saw such a huge exotic beast suddenly appear in the sky above the valley, an ancient saying couldn't help but appear in Zhuowen's mind. "The flying serpent has no feet to fly, the wushu has no 5 skills to use." Chapter 803. A dead emperor-level expert looking up at the humongous flying serpent, Zhuowen's heart could not help but tremble. This flying serpent was too humongous. The aura it faintly emitted caused his entire body to tremble. This was the terrifying aura of a powerful creature. There is actually such a terrifying creature like the flying serpent in this sea of lava, Zhuowen muttered to himself as his lips trembled. "Human, did you kill my bloodline?" The flying serpent looked down at Zhuowen. Its huge eyes were filled with coldness and mercilessness. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He was rather puzzled as he said, "Your bloodline? I'm afraid you have mistaken me for someone else. I did not kill your bloodline." Boom. The flying serpent roared furiously. A terrifying sound wave formed a ring-shaped airwave that blasted towards Zhuowen. This caused Zhuowen to involuntarily cover his ears and retreat several steps. 2 streams of blood flowed out from his ears. The might of the flying serpent's roar actually broke Zhuowen's eardrums, causing him to involuntarily retreat several steps. "You still dare to lie?" Outside the valley, there are countless 3-headed flaming spiritual serpents. "You said you did not kill them?" And the 3-headed flaming spiritual serpent king's corpse is also there. "My bloodline flows in its body. You dare to say you did not kill it?" Roaring furiously, the flying serpent's huge eyes were filled with anger. A pair of blood-red eyes stared eerily at Zhuowen. The 3-headed flaming spiritual serpent king is actually the flying serpent's bloodline. Oh no! Hearing these words, Zhuowen's heart clenched. He finally knew that when he killed the three-headed flaming spiritual serpent king, the latter had said that he could not kill him. Unfortunately, he, Zhuowen, did not think too much about it. It was even more impossible for him to imagine that the Serpent King was actually the flying serpent's descendant. However, what made Zhuowen puzzled was that if the flying serpent was so powerful, why was the three-headed flaming spiritual serpent king so weak? In fact, Zhuowen had made a mistake. The three-headed flaming spirit snake king was just a baby. The flying serpent bloodline in its body had not been activated. That was why it was so weak. Of course, this weak was only relative. After all, the three-headed flaming spirit snake king had the strength of the Xuanzuan realm. It would not be easy to deal with the three-headed flaming spirit snake king in the Xuanzuan realm. It was a pity that Zhuowen was too abnormal. When he was half a step into the Xuanzuan realm, he had already killed many Xuanzuan realm cultivators. He was even able to fight with early-stage Supreme Being cultivators. Now that Zhuowen had advanced to the Xuanzuan realm, his strength was even more terrifying. It was understandable that the three-headed flaming spirit snake king was no match for Zhuowen. It was indeed killed by you, you damned human. I only have one descendant who has perfectly inherited my bloodline. However, you killed it. You really deserve to die. Zhuowen's expression was naturally captured by the soaring serpent's eyes. With a furious roar, the soaring serpent opened its bloody mouth, and a terrifying pillar of fire suddenly shot out, sweeping towards Zhuowen. At the same time, the flying serpent twisted its waist and turned into a huge shadow. It wanted to swallow Zhuowen into its stomach. Xiaohei, hurry up. If the flying serpent catches me, I will definitely die. Zhuowen roared furiously. 4 heads and 8 arms were formed. 8 spears were brandished, and he immediately used the peak of spear intent that he was most adept at. He fiercely attacked the pillar of fire that was getting closer and closer. Crack! What made Zhuowen's pupils shrink was that the 8 spear intent domains were like tofu in front of the pillar of fire. They crumbled inch by inch. Swoosh! The pillar of fire was like a hot knife through butter. After breaking through the spear intent domains, it continued to rush towards Zhuowen. It wanted to devour Zhuowen completely. Zhuowen roared furiously. A sense of danger rose in his heart. His feet stomped and he hurriedly dodged to the side. Unfortunately, the speed of the pillar of fire was too fast. It arrived in front of Zhuowen in an instant. Although Zhuowen dodged most of the pillar of fire, his legs were swallowed by the pillar of fire. In the blink of an eye, Zhuowen's legs were burned by the pillar of fire and completely turned into ashes. Moreover, the flames were extremely strange. They actually followed Zhuowen's calves and spread towards his thighs like maggots. Zhuowen did not hesitate. He fiercely swung the spear in his hands at his legs. His legs were instantly cut off at the knees and fresh blood spurted out. Forcefully enduring the pain in his legs, Zhuowen used the yuan power in his body to staunch the wounds on his legs. However, without his legs, Zhuowen could only lie on the ground and stare helplessly as the soaring serpent approached him. Xiaohei, are you not done yet? I'm going to die soon, Zhuowen shouted loudly. Looking at the approaching soaring serpent, his eyes were filled with despair. This soaring serpent was so terrifying. It was probably comparable to Emperor Qing's level. In fact, Zhuowen could even smell the unpleasant stench coming from the soaring serpent's bloody mouth. 100 meters, 70 meters, 50 meters, 30 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters. At this moment, the distance between the soaring serpent and Zhuowen was only 10 meters. Zhuowen's tiny frame and the gigantic maw of the soaring serpent, at this moment, seemed so incongruous. Human. Those who kill my bloodline must pay the price of death. Go to hell and repent for your mistakes. The soaring serpent's thunderous voice rumbled in Zhuowen's ears. At this critical moment, an inky black light instantly wrapped around Zhuowen. Then, taking advantage of the momentum, Zhuowen's body rapidly shot towards the Azure Dragon Hall behind him and disappeared without a trace in an instant. Bang! The soaring serpent violently slammed into the true dragon's corpse. The powerful force was actually unable to cause the true dragon's corpse to sway in the slightest. It still stood tall and straight like a mountain, unmoving like a boulder. Oh! This human actually entered the Azure Dragon Hall? The restriction outside was actually broken by him? The soaring serpent's enormous body slowly retreated. Its large eyes stared intently at the entrance of the Azure Dragon Hall. Its gaze was filled with unwillingness and a sinister chill. The true dragon was the natural enemy of the soaring serpent. In ancient times, the soaring serpent was actually the prey of the true dragon. Although the Azure Dragon in front of it had been dead for hundreds of thousands of years and had already turned into a corpse, the soaring serpent was still somewhat afraid of it. As for entering the Azure Dragon Hall, that was even more impossible. After all, the Azure Dragon Hall was built within the body of the Azure Dragon. The soaring serpent itself was afraid of the Azure Dragon, so how could it take the risk and enter the Azure Dragon Hall? Humph! That cunning human cannot possibly hide in the Azure Dragon Hall forever. When he comes out, I will definitely make him die without a burial ground. The soaring serpent roared angrily and slowly descended outside the valley. Its large eyes stared intently at the entrance of the Azure Dragon Hall. If Zhuowen appeared, it would definitely not let him off. Whoosh! This was a barren land. A rather miserable figure rushed out from a dark tunnel and violently smashed onto the ground, causing his face to be covered in dust. Xiao Hei, if you had been any slower, I would have become the soaring serpent's meal. The figure that had landed on the ground was naturally Zhuowen, who had been brought into the Azure Dragon Hall by Xiao Hei. At this moment, Zhuowen's legs were still broken at the knees and looked rather terrifying. However, ever since the blood demon had connected the purple-black heart to his heart meridian, Zhuowen's recovery ability was extremely terrifying. His originally broken legs were actually continuously growing from the wounds. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a pair of complete calves had actually grown out from the wounds on Zhuowen's legs, looking exactly the same as when he had not been injured. Slowly getting up, Zhuowen casually jumped a few times. A trace of joy appeared in his eyes. This purple-black heart was really very useful to him. It could even regenerate his broken arms and legs. Speaking of which, he was really a little like an unkillable cockroach. At this moment, Xiao Hei slowly floated in the air in front of him. Her gaze overlooked the barren land with an unprecedented solemnity on her face. Swoosh! Zhuowen came to Xiao Hei's side and also looked down at the barren land. He could not help but frown as he said, "This is the interior of the Azure Dragon Hall?" At a glance, what appeared in front of Zhuowen was a vast and desolate land filled with ravines, canyons, ruins, deep pits. This was a desolate and dilapidated world. Almost no part of the entire land was intact. It was filled with potholes. It was not hard to imagine what kind of great battle the land had experienced before to create such a terrifying and miserable scene. We entered from the entrance of the Azure Dragon Hall. This land is indeed the interior of the Azure Dragon Hall. This land is very ancient and also very decadent. Xiao Hei said cautiously. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He could feel a mournful and resolute feeling from this land that was almost blurry, like a hero past his prime. Raising his head, Zhuowen noticed that there was a dazzling meteor shower in the sky above the boundless land. The countless meteor showers were like the most brilliant fireworks, blooming with their own brilliance and glory, forming a sharp contrast with the land. Just what had happened in this space in the past? Looking up at the dazzling sky and overlooking the vast land, a trace of confusion and doubt appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. This space definitely had a different story in the past. Kid, look over there, there seems to be something there. Suddenly, Xiao Hei waved her little claw and pointed to the front as she spoke to Zhuowen. Following the direction that Xiao Hei pointed, Zhuowen raised his head and looked over. In front of them, there was an extremely large crescent-shaped canyon. This canyon was extremely strange, as if it was not naturally formed. Instead, it was as if a huge blade had descended from the sky and chopped the flat land to form it. In the canyon, there were many figures standing neatly. These figures actually gave off an imposing feeling, as if they were looking up at a very high mountain. Those, are they people? Zhuowen muttered softly as he stared at the figures in the canyon. Let's go. Let's go over and take a look. With that, Zhuowen brought Xiao He and turned into a ray of flowing light as they rushed towards the crescent-shaped canyon in the distance. Soon, they stopped at the edge of the canyon and looked down at the figures in the canyon. Are they all the corpses of experts? Their auras are so powerful. There were more than 30 figures in the center of the canyon. They were all dressed in long robes and looked up at the sky as if they were welcoming something. If I'm not wrong, these 30 or so people are basically Emperor Realm experts. The weakest is about the same as Emperor Qing, and the strongest is even close to a saint. Chapter 804. Origin of the Azure Dragon. All of them are Emperor Realm experts? Zhuowen's heart trembled. There were more than 30 experts in the canyon. In other words, there were more than 30 Emperor Realm experts in front of him. Moreover, among these 30 experts, the weakest was comparable to Emperor Qing, and the strongest was close to a saint. How could Zhuowen not be shocked? In the Qing Xian Empire, Emperor Qing was the only Emperor Realm expert. It could be seen how difficult it was to advance to the Emperor Realm. However, there were more than 30 such experts in front of him now. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that these 30 Emperor Realm experts had calm expressions on their faces. They raised their heads slightly, as if they were facing death calmly. Who killed more than 30 Emperor Realm cultivators at the same time? Looking at the corpses of more than 30 experts in the canyon, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with doubt. Emperor-level experts were not so easy to kill. Moreover, there were more than 30 Emperor-level experts here. Even a saint might not be able to kill them instantly. This space experienced a fierce battle back then. Even Emperor-level experts fell. I wonder if the master of the Azure Dragon Hall is still alive. Xiao He carefully observed the corpses of more than 30 experts in the canyon and said indifferently, "In this Azure Dragon Palace, other than this canyon, is there no other place of value?" However, Zhuowen frowned slightly. All along the way, all he saw were ruins and potholes. Besides this gorge, he didn't discover anything else. Could it be that this Azure Dragon Hall is empty? After searching around, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a hint of disappointment. He originally thought that there would be some good things in the Azure Dragon Hall. However, other than the corpses of more than 30 Emperor-level experts in the Crescent Canyon, there was nothing else. After returning to the canyon, Zhuowen discovered that Xiao He was still focused on studying the corpses of the experts in the canyon. He asked, "Xiao He, did you find anything?" Shaking her head, Xiao He sighed softly, "I didn't discover much, but I did some research just now. Before these martial emperors died, they all welcomed death without any signs of resistance. Die generously? Are you saying that these emperor-level powerhouses committed suicide?" Zhuowen's pupils constricted. Xiao He shook her head and said, "It's not suicide. It should be because they encountered an enemy that was much stronger than them, and they believed that they would die without a doubt, so they simply stopped resisting and went to their deaths." Oh, an enemy that was much stronger than them? Could it be that the saints are dealing with them? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. It should be a saint. Furthermore, I suspect that it is very likely that the master of the Azure Dragon Palace killed these emperor-level experts. Xiao He analyzed in an orderly manner. Nodding his head, Zhuowen agreed with Xiao He's words. The master of the Azure Dragon Palace was a powerful saint, and these emperor-level experts looked like invaders. It made sense for the master of the Azure Dragon Palace to kill these emperor-level experts. Then what about the master of the Azure Dragon Palace? Staring at the experts in the canyon, Zhuowen was extremely interested in the master of the Azure Dragon Palace. He did not believe that the master of the Azure Dragon Palace would not leave anything behind in such a large space. "Hey, kid, look." Before these emperor-level experts died, they all raised their heads and looked in one direction. Could it be that there's something special about the direction they're looking in? Xiao He's sudden voice caused Zhuowen's eyes to light up. It was indeed as Xiao He had said. These emperor-level experts were all looking in one direction, and more than 30 of them were looking in the same direction. "Let's go. Let's enter the canyon and look in the direction of these experts. Perhaps we'll be able to find something different." With that, Zhuowen leaped into the canyon and stood beside one of the experts. He imitated the latter and looked up at the sky. Xiao Hei stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and also looked up at the sky. That's a star. Very quickly, Zhuowen noticed that at the end of the direction they were looking, a brilliant white star appeared in their eyes. This white star was extremely inconspicuous because in front of it was a countless meteor shower. The white star was easily covered by the countless meteor shower. In the direction of the canyon, and with these experts looking up, they could barely see the existence of the white star. Xiao Hei. Could that white star be an important place in this space? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Xiao Hei lowered her head and muttered to herself for a moment before saying, there should be a reason why so many Emperor-level experts are looking up at that white star at the same time. That white star must be extraordinary. Let's go up and take a look. Millimeter. Hearing this, Zhuowen followed Xiao Hei's instructions and 3 pairs of lightning wings grew out of his back. He turned into a terrifying bolt of lightning and suddenly shot upwards at an extremely high speed. The white star was extremely far away from the ground. Zhuowen had been flying for a full 2 hours, but he actually discovered that the distance between him and the white star had not changed at all. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. He stomped his foot and his speed increased by a large margin. His entire body turned into a swift bolt of lightning as he cut through the void. 4 hours later, Zhuowen arrived at the meteor belt in the sky. This meteor belt was formed by countless meteors that had fallen from the sky. As they cut through the void, due to the friction, they produced an extremely dazzling light. It could be said that the meteor belt was filled with burning meteors. Furthermore, the temperature was extremely terrifying. If Zhuowen were to be hit directly, he would not be able to withstand it. Kid, be careful, this meteor belt is not a friendly place. Xiao Hei cautioned cautiously. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He stomped his foot lightly and his speed decreased significantly. At the same time, he used his perception to constantly observe the movements of the surrounding meteors. In this meteor belt, Zhuowen did not dare to explode with his full speed. After all, there were simply too many meteors. If he were to go too fast, it would be difficult to control when the time came. It would be very easy for him to be hit. At that time, he would really be unlucky. As he slowly advanced, Zhuowen constantly paid attention to the movements in his surroundings. For a moment, he was scared but not in danger. Although the surrounding meteors were very dense, Zhuowen was extremely cautious and managed to avoid them one by one. Be careful. There is a meteor on your left that is rushing towards you at high speed. Suddenly, Xiao Hei's solemn voice rang out, startling Zhuowen. He turned his head to look. Indeed, on his left, there was a meteor that was dozens of feet in size. It carried a blazing heat and was rushing towards him at an extremely fast speed. Damn it! Hurry up and get out of here. Zhuowen's expression changed drastically. He stomped his foot in an attempt to dodge the meteor that was rushing towards him at high speed. Unfortunately, his speed was still slower than the meteor by a beat. Bang! The huge meteor directly hit Zhuowen's leg, causing him to lose his balance and fall downwards. Kid, steady yourself. There are more meteors below. If you don't steady yourself, your situation will become extremely bad. Xiao Hei shouted sternly. At this moment, Zhuowen was also very calm. Golden light flashed as he transformed into 4 heads and 8 arms. The smaller meteors that were rushing towards him were all shattered by his hands. After falling for nearly 100 meters, Zhuowen finally stabilized himself. His breathing was slightly hurried. This meteor belt was indeed not a good place. The huge meteor just now was too terrifying. Even if Zhuowen used the nirvana of the great sun, he would not dare to face it head-on. Be careful this time, Xiao Hei reminded him. Nodding his head, Zhuowen stomped his foot and once again rushed towards the depths of the meteor belt. His speed was much slower than before, and he was even more cautious than before. 4 hours later, Zhuowen suddenly jumped out of the meteor belt and arrived in the sky opposite the meteor belt. I'm finally out. The white star is not far away from us. Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief. His gaze converged on the white star in the sky. At this moment, the white star was much larger than before. Zhuowen knew that he was not far away from the white star. Let's go. Let's see the true appearance of the white star. Xiao Hei's face was also filled with curiosity as she hurriedly said, "Whoosh." With that, Zhuowen once again transformed into a bolt of lightning and rushed towards the white star that was getting closer and closer. His speed was much faster than before. An hour later, a bolt of lightning streaked across the void and stopped 1,000 meters away from the white star, revealing a tall and straight figure. Looking at the white star that was 1,000 meters away, Zhuowen could not help but be stunned. His mouth was slightly agape. The scene in front of him was really shocking. The true appearance of the white star was a pale white dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long. The pale white dragon was strangely pale from head to toe. The pale dragon's huge body was curled up as if it was protecting something. Through the pale dragon's body, Zhuowen saw that at the center of the huge dragon was an equally huge hall. Above the hall were 3 bold and powerful words, Azure Dragon Hall. The hall that was protected by the huge dragon in front of him was the real Azure Dragon Hall. So this is the real Azure Dragon Hall. This pale dragon should be formed from the origin of the Azure Dragon. It should be the work of the master of the Azure Dragon Hall. Xiao Hei said with a cautious gaze. The origin of the Azure Dragon? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Xiao Hei glanced at Zhuowen and explained, the owner of this true dragon's corpse is the Azure Dragon, I've already told you. Although the Azure Dragon has been dead for a long time, there will still be a trace of its origin in its corpse. The master of the Azure Dragon Hall is very lucky. When he found the Azure Dragon's corpse, it shouldn't have been dead for long. That's why he was able to extract a strand of origin energy from its corpse. The huge Azure Dragon around the Azure Dragon Hall is formed from the Azure Dragon's origin. It doesn't have any intelligence or consciousness, but it contains an extremely dense amount of origin energy. If you can enter the Azure Dragon Hall, I'm afraid you can use the Azure Dragon's origin to quickly raise your cultivation. At this point, Xiao Hei's eyes revealed a trace of emotion. It was obvious that he admired the methods of the Azure Dragon Hall. So it's not a true dragon, but a strand of the Azure Dragon's origin. Chapter 805. Kanglong Daoist. I wonder what kind of treasures exist in the Kanglong Hall. Zhuowen's gaze shifted slightly as he looked at the Kanglong Hall above the Kanglong Hall. His eyes were burning with passion. Xiao Hei nodded and muttered, the Kanglong Hall is a saint's cave after all. The things inside are definitely not bad. It depends on whether you have the ability to obtain them. Let's go up and take a look. As he spoke, Xiao Hei took the lead and flew towards the Kanglong Hall. Zhuowen followed behind him, not to be outdone, and instantly ascended to the top of the Kanglong Hall. In front of the hall was an extremely huge square. In front of the square, there was a huge hollow door. The ground was shrouded in a misty white mist, as if an immortal had descended to this place. Stepping on the clouds under his feet, Zhuowen entered the square door and arrived at the square. At the end of the square, there was a hall that was as vast as a giant beast. It stood there quietly, unchanging since ancient times. In front of the hall, there was a stone tablet that was dozens of feet tall. On the surface of the stone tablet, the words Kanglong Hall were engraved. Zhuowen knew that the vast hall in front of him was the real Kanglong Hall. Rumble. Suddenly, the countless clouds and mist that lingered on the ground of the square suddenly started to roll. A strange force rushed out from the entire square, causing Zhuowen to involuntarily take a few steps back. His eyes were filled with bewilderment. What's going on? The clouds and mist in this square. Before he could finish speaking, countless clouds and mist rolled and gathered in the sky above the square to form a stalwart figure. The figure formed by the clouds and mist was the image of a middle-aged man. He wore a loose robe and had a feathered crown on his head. His eyes were bright like the moon and bright like the stars. Countless dragon shadows swept out and circled around this imposing figure. It was an extremely magnificent and terrifying sight. I am the Kanglong Daoist. The Kanglong Hall was built by me, and you are the first person to enter the Kanglong Hall in tens of thousands of years. The stalwart man slowly bent down. His eyes flickered with a bright light, as if they contained the evolution of countless centuries and were filled with vicissitudes. Kanglong Daoist. The master of the Kanglong Hall? Hearing this, Zhuowen's pupils constricted as he stared fixedly at the stalwart man. He could feel the terror of the Kanglong Daoist in front of him. Are you still alive? What happened in the space of the Kanglong Hall? Zhuowen suddenly asked anxiously. However, Daoist Kanglong Daoist, only Daoist glanced indifferently at Zhuowen, before he raised his head once again, as if he was recalling something. Brat. This should be the phantom left behind by Taoist Master Kanglong back then. It's impossible for him to know what you're talking about. Don't waste your time. Blackie stood on Zhuowen's shoulder and said indifferently. Daoist long Daoist, long Daoist. Xiao He sneered and said, you have never experienced how terrifying the catastrophe was back then. Let me tell you, the ancient era was the most prosperous era of martial arts in the Heavenly Armor continent. At that time, Emperor-level and Saint-level experts were extremely common, unlike now where even Saint-level experts are pitifully rare. In that era, there was even a sage grand ceremony. Tens of thousands of Saint-level experts invited a Tao discussion conference. That was a glorious era where geniuses came forth in large numbers and experts were as common as clouds. Speaking of this, Xiao He's face revealed a trace of emotion. Clearly, he had also recalled some past events from the ancient era. Sage grand ceremony? The more Zhuowen listened, the more surprised he became. Tens of thousands of Saint-level experts had participated in the grand ceremony, countless Saint-level experts had discussed and comprehended the Tao. Thinking of such a scene, Zhuowen could not help but feel a little shocked and excited. In Zhuowen's current era, it was hard to even see a Saint-level expert. As expected, it could not be compared to the ancient era at all. These things are still too far away for you, and you won't be able to come into contact with such things. Now, let's see what Taoist Master Kanglong has to say. Xiao He shook his head and did not continue speaking. Instead, he signaled Zhuowen to pay attention to Taoist Master Kanglong's movements. The Azure Dragon Hall contains a universe within, forming a world of its own. Many wonders are in the hall. There are a total of 3 worlds in the hall. If you pass through each world, you will receive a corresponding reward. Moreover, each of these 3 worlds is more dangerous than the last. If you are not careful, your life will be in danger. If you are a coward who is afraid of death, then there is no need to enter the Azure Dragon Hall. As he spoke, Taoist Master Kanglong looked down at Zhuowen and asked indifferently, are you willing to pass through the Azure Dragon Hall? Kid. You have to think carefully. Taoist Master Kanglong is a Saint-level expert. The Azure Dragon Hall that he set up is also filled with danger. It's best to think carefully before making a decision. Xiao He's gaze also converged on Zhuowen. He was also waiting for Zhuowen's answer. Zhuowen laughed and said in a clear voice, charge. Why not? There is no free lunch in this world. Since I want to obtain benefits, then I have to bet my life. If I don't even dare to bet my life, then how can I become a powerhouse? As he spoke, Zhuowen suddenly stomped his foot and directly stepped through the door of the Azure Dragon Hall in front of him. Buzz. The moment Zhuowen stepped into the Azure Dragon Hall, an invisible wave was produced and instantly enveloped Zhuowen's entire body. Then, Zhuowen discovered that his vision went black. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, he discovered that he was standing on the peak of a towering mountain. A wild wind swept over, blowing Zhuowen's disheveled hair. On the peak of the mountain, Zhuowen looked down and discovered that there was a vast and boundless land below. On the land, there were countless living beings. At the same time, cities were like countless black dots that covered every corner of the land. Suddenly, a golden light flashed. On a huge rock beside Zhuowen, lines of golden words appeared. This is a layer of heaven and earth. This heaven and earth is ruled by Shengzon. There are countless demons hidden in this abyss of heaven and earth. These demons are very strong and have an undying body. Killing them is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The only way is to comprehend the power of heaven and earth within 3 years. Only the power of heaven and earth is the nemesis of demons. 3 years later, demons will descend upon this world and all living beings will be wiped out. You are no exception. Head to Shenzhen and enter the Shenzhen Wall of Enlightenment. Comprehend the Tao for 3 years. If you comprehend the power of heaven and earth, you will live. If you don't comprehend it, you will die. Looking at the golden words on the wall, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. According to the words of the Kanglong Taoist, wouldn't he have to stay in this world for 3 years? That was too long. Now, Zhuowen was most worried about his family and friends in the outside world. Not only Lu Hantian, but also the Zhuo family. After all, his identity as a Rika descendant had been exposed. It would not be difficult to find out about the Zhuo family behind him. 3 years is too long. Can it be faster? Zhuowen suddenly shouted to the sky. The flow of time in the Kanglong Hall is 365 times faster than the outside world. A day in the outside world is a year in the Kanglong Hall. A vigorous voice sounded in his mind at a steady pace. A year here is only a day in the outside world. This Kanglong Taoist is so powerful that he can actually change the laws of time of heaven and earth. Xiao Hei's eyes flickered, revealing a look of shock. Zhuowen, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief. If what the Kanglong Taoist said was true, then he had a lot of time. After all, a year in this world was only a day in the outside world. Xiao Hei, what is the power of heaven and earth? Zhuowen suddenly asked with a frown. Zhuowen was indeed not familiar with the power of heaven and earth that the Kanglong Taoist had mentioned. He could only consult Xiao Hei. Above the concept is the power of heaven and earth. The power of heaven and earth is a mysterious power that is even stronger than the power of concept. The essence of the power of concept is actually to use the mysterious power to magnify one's potential by thousands of times, causing one's strength to increase to an extremely exaggerated level in a short period of time. However, the power of heaven and earth is different. The concept is to stimulate one's potential, but the power of heaven and earth is to stimulate the power of heaven and earth. Relying on the mysterious power, the power of heaven and earth is added to one's body for one's own use. When Xiao Hei said until here, he saw that Zhuowen was still somewhat puzzled. He shook his head and said, there is a limit to a person's strength. The power of concept that you can use is limited. However, the power of heaven and earth is released by heaven and earth. The stronger heaven and earth is, the stronger the power that you can borrow will be. Hearing this, a look of understanding appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. In layman's terms, the power of concept was actually to use one's body as a container to allow this container to carry more power. Then, one had to continuously increase the capacity of the container. However, there was ultimately a limit to this. On the other hand, the power of heaven and earth was to use heaven and earth as a container. If one wanted to become stronger, one only needed to borrow the power of heaven and earth. There was an essential difference between the two. Comprehending the power of heaven and earth is much more difficult than comprehending the concept. Although your talent is indeed strong, it is not very likely that you can comprehend such a mysterious power in a short 3 years. Xiao Hei shook his head and said in a rather pessimistic tone. Shrugging his shoulders, Zhuowen said, didn't Taoist Kanglong just mention that there is an enlightenment rock wall in Shenzhen, the ruler of this heaven and earth? Perhaps that enlightenment rock wall will be of great benefit to my comprehension? Yes. Taoist Kanglong emphasized the enlightenment rock wall in Shenzhen. I'm afraid that thing will be of great help to your comprehension. Now, let's go to Shenzhen first. Xiao Hei nodded in agreement. Then, he stood on Zhuowen's shoulder. Following the latter, he turned into a gust of wind and swept towards the huge land below the mountain peak. At the center of this heaven and earth, there was an extremely huge mountain range. This mountain range stretched for tens of thousands of miles. At a glance, it looked like a huge crouching dragon. Above this mountain range, thick clouds and mist lingered all year round, covering the landscape of the mountain range. This mountain range was called the Holy Vein by the creatures of this heaven and earth. Above the Holy Vein, there was a huge sect called Shenzhen. It was the true ruler of this heaven and earth, and was revered and worshipped by countless people. A figure suddenly swept over and entered the clouds and mist above the Holy Vein. After 2 hours, the figure reappeared with a frown on his face. There are quite powerful restrictions around this Holy Vein. We can't find the specific location of Shenzhen at all. Chapter 806. Na Lan Hongyu Shenzhen is not simple. If you barge in like this, it is unlikely that you will be able to barge in. There are quite a few people gathered at the foot of the mountain. Perhaps there is a grand event in Shenzhen. When the time comes, you just have to sneak in. Xiao Hei's eyes darted around and immediately noticed that there were quite a few people gathered at the foot of Shenzhen. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded his head. With a stomp of his foot, he landed in an extremely remote corner. Then, he walked out of the corner and immediately discovered that there was a sea of people at the foot of Shenzhen. It was quite a spectacular sight. The foot of Shenzhen is so lively. Looking at the sea of people at the foot of the mountain, Zhuowen could not help but reveal a look of astonishment. It seemed that it was just as Xiao Hei had said. There was indeed a grand event in Shenzhen today. Moreover, Zhuowen also discovered that the crowd at the foot of the mountain were basically elders bringing along some young boys and girls. Those young boys and girls all had looks of anticipation in their eyes. Zhuowen silently stood in the crowd. Relying on his sharp senses, he could hear all the discussions around him. And he finally knew why Shenzhen was so lively today. It turned out that today was Shenzhen's triennial mountain opening ceremony. And this so-called mountain opening ceremony was to open Shenzhen's mountain gate and begin to recruit geniuses from the countless surrounding cities, thus replenishing Shenzhen with new blood. For this reason, the elders of countless surrounding cities all brought their own juniors and rushed to Shenzhen's mountain gate from thousands of miles away in order to participate in this mountain opening ceremony. They hoped that their juniors would be chosen by Shenzhen and become a member of Shenzhen. So it's to recruit disciples. Hearing the discussions around him, Zhuowen's eyes flashed and he muttered to himself in a low voice, "Anyway, my goal is to enter Shenzhen. I might as well participate in this mountain opening ceremony." The restrictions around Shenzhen were very strong. Even Xiao Hei could not break through them. Therefore, if he wanted to enter Shenzhen, he still had to rely on the internal members of Shenzhen to lead him. Once he entered Shenzhen, with Zhuowen's strength, where could he not go? It would not be difficult to find the Enlightenment Cliff. Thinking of this, Zhuowen calmly stood in the crowd, appearing extremely inconspicuous as he silently waited for the opening ceremony to begin. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that the cultivators gathered at the foot of the mountain were generally not very strong. The strongest among them was around the level of a 5-wheel Ultimate Emperor. There was no one who had surpassed the level of a 4-wheel Ultimate Emperor. It was very obvious that the cultivators in this layer of heaven were generally weak. However, Zhuowen knew that there were definitely 4-wheel Ultimate Emperors in Shenzhen. After all, this was the ruler of this world. It was impossible for such an expert to not exist. Thump, thump, thump. Suddenly, the crisp sound of horse hooves rang out from the end of the road on the other side of the mountain gate. It caused the entire area to shake. The sound of horse hooves immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. They all looked towards the end of the road. At the end of the road, a group of armored cavalry was rapidly approaching. There were more than a dozen people in this cavalry group. Standing at the very front of the group was a valiant and heroic figure. She was leading the way. This figure was a young woman in her prime. She was dressed in red armor with 5 red flags on the back of her armor. She sat on a tall horse and the flags fluttered in the wind. She looked quite carefree. "Are they from Saint Light City?" The woman in the lead is the daughter of the Saint Light City Lord, Na Lan Hongyu. Saint Light City is the most powerful faction among the countless cities. The Saint Light City Lord, Na Lan Shong, is known as the #1 City Lord. It's best if we don't provoke them. Na Lan Hongyu is quite petty. It's best if we don't provoke her. It won't be a good thing if she remembers us. Many people's expressions changed slightly when they saw the large group of cavalry rushing over. They discussed animatedly and opened up a path for them. Hearing the discussions of the surrounding people, Zhuowen also knew that the group of cavalry rushing over had a powerful background. Otherwise, it would be impossible for everyone to be so wary of them. Humph! What's so great about Saint Light City? If Na Lan Shong hadn't encountered a fortuitous encounter back then, how could he have become the #1 City Lord? If I can obtain Nalan Shong's fortuitous encounter, my achievements will only be better and stronger than his. A somewhat sour voice sounded from beside Zhuowen. On Zhuowen's left, a middle-aged man with a face as black as charcoal raised his head slightly. There was a trace of disdain in his eyes. He was actually extremely disdainful of Saint Light City. Master, you are right. The Saint Light City Lord really can't compare to you. Your talent completely surpasses Nalan Shong's. All you lack is a fortuitous encounter. A young man and a young woman followed beside the middle-aged man. They should be his disciples. At this moment, the young man and woman hurriedly flattered the black-faced man. The middle-aged man enjoyed the flattery of his disciples. He raised his chin and chuckled, of course. If I also have a fortuitous encounter, my achievements will definitely surpass Nalan Shong's. Zhuowen inwardly shook his head when he heard this. This middle-aged man thought too highly of himself. He was already so old, but he was only a third-wheel ultimate emperor. Even if he had a fortuitous encounter, his achievements wouldn't be much better. Zhuowen naturally wouldn't say such words. He only watched indifferently as the middle-aged man blew his own trumpet. Oh! Do you mean that if you also have a fortuitous encounter, you can replace my father's position as the #1 city lord? Suddenly, an indifferent voice was slowly transmitted over from a short distance away. Nalan Hongyu's group had unknowingly arrived at a spot not far from the black-faced man, and the black-faced man's words were naturally heard by Nalan Hongyu. The black-faced man's expression froze when he heard this. He turned his head and happened to see Nalan Hongyu coldly staring at him. His entire body involuntarily trembled. So it's Miss Nalan. I was just spouting nonsense. Don't take it seriously. The black-faced man hurriedly explained. When Nalan Hongyu appeared, the young man and young woman standing beside the black-faced man kept their heads lowered, not daring to look at her face. Unfortunately, I already took it seriously. Nalan Hongyu's beautiful face was filled with coldness and ruthlessness. She said to the soldiers behind her, "These 3 people insulted our Saint Light City. They deserve to die." Yes, yes. More than 10 heavily armored soldiers responded in unison. Then, they dismounted from their horses and charged at the black-faced man with long spears in their hands. The black-faced man hadn't expected Nalan Hongyu to be so unruly and unscrupulous. He immediately roared angrily and charged forward, wanting to escape the encirclement. Poochie. A long spear swept past and instantly pierced through the black-faced man's chest. His strength wasn't bad as he was a third-wheel ultimate emperor. Unfortunately, the soldiers behind Nalan Hongyu weren't weak either. They were also third-wheel ultimate emperors. Moreover, there were more than 10 of them working together. The black-faced man was no match for them at all. The 2 disciples beside the black-faced man couldn't escape the fate of being killed either. In just an instant, 3 corpses appeared on the field. Many people in the surroundings gasped when they saw the 3 people killed in an instant. Their eyes were filled with fear and dread as they looked at Nalan Hongyu. They had long heard that Nalan Hongyu was crafty and unreasonable. Now, it seemed that the rumors weren't false. She had directly taken the lives of the black-faced man just because of a few words. She was indeed too domineering. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He was also rather displeased with Nalan Hongyu's actions. However, the black-faced man could only blame himself for being too talkative. He clearly knew that Nalan Hongyu couldn't be provoked, but he still insisted on using the Saint Light City's city lord as an example. If he wasn't courting death, then what was? And the 6 of you. Just now, this person was slandering our Saint Light City, but the 6 of you didn't say anything to stop him. You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. Cripple the 6 of them. After killing the black-faced man and the other 2, Nalan Hongyu didn't seem to have vented her anger. Her cold eyes immediately stared at the 6 people standing beside the black-faced man. Surprisingly, Zhuowen was among these 6 people. After all, Zhuowen was standing beside the black-faced man. At this moment, Nalan Hongyu had treated him as a target to take care of. Hearing these words, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. Nalan Hongyu had gone too far. It was fine that she had killed the black-faced man, But the 6 of them had nothing to do with the black-faced man at all. Could it be that just because the black-faced man had slandered Saint Light City and they didn't say anything to refute him, she wanted to cripple their cultivation? This method of harming innocent bystanders was too overbearing. Miss Nayland, this has nothing to do with us. The black-faced man was the one who slandered Saint Light City. It has nothing to do with us at all. Among the 6 people who had been found out, one of them was rather fat. At this moment, he was somewhat unconvinced as he stood up and spoke. Crack! A shadow suddenly flashed out. The fat man hadn't even finished speaking when the shadow had already heavily smashed into his chest. Soon after, it pierced through. It was actually a long spear that glowed with cold light. The fat man's face was filled with disbelief. He hadn't even finished speaking when he had actually suffered a fatal disaster. This was something he had never expected. Did I allow you to speak? Nayland Hongyu coldly glanced at the fat man, then her gaze landed on the other 5 people. She said indifferently, I think all of you should be more aware. Cripple your own cultivation so that my people don't have to do anything. As soon as these words were spoken, besides Zhuoan, the expressions of the other 4 people became extremely unsightly. Nayland Hongyu actually wanted them to cripple their own cultivation. This was a huge humiliation. I'll count to 3. If you still don't cripple your own cultivation, then your fate will be the same as that person from before. As she spoke, Nayland Hongyu pointed at the already dead fat man. 1, 2, 3. When Nayland Hongyu counted to 3, 4 of them shouted loudly as their hands suddenly smashed onto their lower abdomens. Instantly, their dantians were shattered, and they became complete cripples from then on. The 4 of them let out a shrill cry as they held onto their abdomens and fell to the ground. They screamed hysterically and rolled about. Their appearance was extremely miserable. Nayland Hongyu nodded with satisfaction, and then her gaze finally descended onto the last young man. Her shapely brows raised as she said, Why haven't you crippled your own cultivation? Could it be that you want to die? As soon as these words were spoken, the gazes of the surrounding people converged onto the young man. Their hearts were filled with curiosity, curious about the young man's current actions. Do you think you have the qualifications? Chapter 807. Mountain Opening Ceremony. Nayland Hongyu's beautiful eyes narrowed and her gaze became even more gloomy. The young man in front of her was really reckless. He actually dared to speak to her in such a manner. Do you dare to repeat what you just said? Nayland Hongyu said coldly. At this moment, the surrounding crowd's gazes were gathered on Zhuoan. They really wanted to know how the young man would respond to Nayland Hongyu's question. Utterly boring. Zhuoan shook his head and ignored Nayland Hongyu. In his opinion, this was just a small quarrel and he naturally would not take it to heart. How dare you ignore me? Fine. Today I will let you know the consequences of offending me. Go, cripple this person's limbs. I want him to kneel and beg for mercy. Zhuoan's disregard made Nayland Hongyu extremely angry. She pointed her jade-like finger at the soldier beside her and coldly said, Yes. The soldier nodded. He grasped the long spear in his hand and took a step forward. His entire body was like a swimming dragon as he charged directly towards Zhuoan. His speed soared to the extreme. Brat, you can only blame yourself for being blind and offending Miss Nayland. You better reflect on yourself when you go to hell. In an instant, the soldier arrived in front of Zhuoan. He moved his spear and stabbed towards Zhuoan's chest. However, Zhuoan was dumbfounded as he stood there without moving. This brat is courting death. He is actually not dodging. I'm afraid he is really scared silly. Since he doesn't have any strength, he shouldn't cause trouble. After all, trouble comes from the mouth. Many people secretly shook their heads and sighed when they saw Zhuoan's stunned appearance. They all believed that the young man in front of them was undoubtedly going to die. The smile on Nayland Hongyu's lips grew wider and her beautiful eyes were filled with arrogance. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and coldly stared at the stunned young man. You are just a piece of trash with a glib tongue. Serves you right if you die. Ding. The sound of metal clashing resounded. Following which, The soldier's right hand pressed against the end of the long spear. His entire body was like a statue and he was actually unable to move an inch forward. Many people immediately saw the soldier's strange behavior and it caused the confusion in their eyes to become even more intense. They were secretly guessing what the soldier was doing. "What are you doing? Just kill him." Nalan Hongyu also saw the soldier's strange behavior and coldly snorted. Her beautiful face was full of displeasure. On the other hand, the soldier couldn't say anything. When the spear pierced Zhuowen's chest, he thought he had succeeded, but the next scene left him dumbfounded. This was because when his spear was pressed against Zhuowen's chest, it was as if it was pressed against a hard rock. It was unable to move even an inch. In other words, this young man's body was much harder than his spear. "Even if I stand here and let him kill me, he won't be able to. What's the point of keeping such a piece of trash?" Zhuowen finally opened his mouth. With a stomp of his foot, a terrifying strength chi burst out, causing the spear in his chest to crumble inch by inch, turning into countless fragments. Then, he clenched his right hand into a fist and fiercely punched the soldier's chest. Poochie. A mouthful of blood spurted out, and like a butterfly with its wings broken, the soldier flew backwards and crashed heavily onto the ground more than 10 meters away. After struggling for a while, he became completely motionless. What? He killed an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator with a single punch. How can this kid be so terrifying? Everyone's gazes converged on the motionless soldier nearby. Everyone knew that this soldier was probably already dead. However, this was an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator after all. Killing him with a single punch was a little too terrifying, wasn't it? The smile on Nalan Hongyu's face froze. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at Zhuowen as she said coldly, "You dare kill someone from my Light Saint City? He wants to kill me. Do you think I can't kill him?" Zhuowen sneered. Nalan Hongyu's face was gloomy as she said coldly, "Attack together. I want this kid to stay here forever." As soon as these words came out, more than a dozen armored soldiers around Nalan Hongyu turned into afterimages and rushed toward Zhuowen who was in the center. "Good timing." Zhuowen sneered. With a stomp of his foot, 3 pairs of lightning wings sprouted from his back. His entire body turned into an ethereal bolt of lightning. Everyone saw a bolt of lightning flash across the bodies of the 10 or so soldiers. Following which, the bodies of the 10 or so soldiers suddenly froze and were sent flying back, smashing into the ground tens of meters away. They struggled in pain and screamed incessantly. A bolt of lightning flashed past and appeared in the center of the clearing, revealing a tall and straight figure. "You'd better not provoke me again. Otherwise, you'll pay a much higher price next time." He glanced coldly at Nalan Hongyu, causing her to involuntarily take a few steps back. Zhuowen found a rather remote corner and silently waited for Shengzon's mountain opening ceremony to begin. Right now, his goal was Shengzon's Wall of Enlightenment, so he didn't want to cause trouble so soon. Hiss, hiss. Everyone couldn't help but gasp when they saw the dozen or so soldiers that had been instantly sent flying. More than a dozen Ultimate Emperor Realm 3-wheeled soldiers had actually been defeated by this mysterious youth in a single exchange. Wasn't this speed too fast? Who exactly is this kid? Why have I never heard of him before? I've never heard of him either, but this kid is very strong. He'll definitely be able to enter Shengzon during this mountain opening ceremony. That's right. This kid's cultivation is at least at the Ultimate Emperor Realm. Entering Shengzon won't be a problem at all. The sounds of discussion were accompanied by an uproar. Everyone's eyes involuntarily glanced towards the corner where Zhuowen was, discussing the latter's background and identity. Zhuowen didn't care about the discussions around him. No matter how they guessed, Zhuowen couldn't possibly be a cultivator of this world. Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes flickered. She didn't provoke Zhuowen again. The strength that Zhuowen had just displayed made her realize that this kid was much stronger than her and couldn't be easily provoked. However, Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes were filled with resentment. Zhuowen's actions had undoubtedly caused her to lose face in front of everyone. Late in the morning, the majestic gates of Shengzon finally opened slowly under the expectant gazes of the crowd. A group of people swept out from within. In front of this group of people, there were two figures with particularly powerful auras. One of them was dressed in long black robes and had a cold expression. The other was an old man with a black mole between his eyebrows. Behind the two of them were 20 youths who weren't very old. These youths were surprisingly dressed the same way. They should be disciples of Shengzon. Zhuowen raised his eyebrows when he saw the black-robed man and the old man with the black mole. These two people weren't weak. He could sense that the black-robed man was at the ultimate emperor realm, while the old man was slightly weaker. He was at the ultimate emperor realm. This kind of cultivation was indeed enough to completely suppress the crowd at the foot of the mountain. This was because the strongest person in the crowd was only at the ultimate emperor realm. Haha. Today is the grand opening ceremony of Shengzon. I would like to thank everyone for coming. The old man with the black mole said with a smile. Elder Bai, stop talking nonsense. Take out the testing stone tablets and test them, the black-robed man said coldly. The old man with the black mole called Elder Bai nodded and waved his sleeve. Instantly, 20 huge stone tablets descended from the sky. If one looked closely, the surface of these huge stone tablets was embedded with 10 precious pearls from bottom to top. They looked rather magnificent. These are the testing stone tablets. Everyone can see that there are 10 precious pearls embedded on the surface of the testing stone tablet. The testing stone tablet is testing the comprehensive result of your aptitude and strength. The more pearls you can light up, the better your result will be. After he finished speaking, the black-robed man said to the 20 disciples of Shengzon behind him, the 20 of you will each be responsible for one stone tablet. There will be no mistakes. Yes. The 20 disciples of Shengzon replied in unison. Then, they turned into 20 streaks of flowing light and arrived in front of their respective stone tablets. They were prepared to preside over the testing stone tablets. Second uncle, do you still remember me? As soon as the black-robed man finished speaking, a rather crisp voice rang out and attracted the attention of the black-robed man and the surrounding people. A beautiful figure suddenly arrived in front of the mountain gate and stood beside the black-robed man with a charming smile on her face. Oh, Hongyu. Haha, I didn't expect that you would also come to participate in the opening ceremony. The black-robed man was stunned at first. Then, his gaze converged on Naylan Hongyu, who was standing in front of him. A rare smile appeared on his cold face. It was my father who asked me to come. I had no choice. He also said that I would have to rely on you to take care of me in Shengzon this time. As she spoke, Naylan Hongyu hugged the black-robed man's arm in an extremely intimate manner. The black-robed man didn't avoid it and said indifferently, Big brother is still so shrewd. I'm afraid he knows that I will be in this opening ceremony, so he asked you to come, right? Naylan Hongyu stuck out her tongue and said, Second uncle, nothing can escape your eyes. All right. Since you have personally come to Shengzon, I can't be a bad host, right? You don't have to take the test for the opening ceremony. When the time comes, I will directly ask for a position as an inner court disciple for you, the black-robed man said dotingly. As he spoke, the black-robed man's gaze landed on Elder Bai, who was standing nearby, and he said, Elder Bai, this girl is my niece. I want to promote her to an inner court disciple. You won't have any objections, right? Elder Bai frowned slightly. Naylan Hongyu wasn't young, and her cultivation was only at the ultimate emperor realm. Logically speaking, she didn't have the qualifications to become an inner court disciple. However, the black-robed man's status was higher than his, so he couldn't refuse. He could only tactfully say, we can't decide on this matter. When the time comes, we will need to seek the approval of the Holy Lord. I know. When the time comes, I will personally go to the Holy Lord. The black-robed man nodded. This scene was naturally witnessed by everyone below the mountain gate. Many people's eyes flickered with displeasure. The black-robed man was opening the back door for Naylan Hongyu in public. Wasn't he a little too arrogant and despotic? Chapter 808. Test and contradiction. Let the test begin. Only those who can light up 6 pearls or more will pass and become Shengzon's outer disciples. If you can light up 10 pearls, you will be promoted to an inner disciple. Elder waved his sleeves. Immediately, the crowd split into 20 teams and went to their respective stone tablets in an orderly manner to take the test. Zhuowen was at the end of the line for the third stone tablet. At this moment, the juniors in the line had excited and expectant looks in their eyes. They rubbed shoulders and were eager to give it a try. The youth in the first line could not wait to place his right palm on the stone tablet. However, to his disappointment, only 3 pearls lit up on the stone tablet. Light up 3 pearls, failed. Next. The Shengzon disciple beside the stone tablet said coldly with a cold expression. Feeling the gazes from the crowd, the youth was too ashamed to show his face. He left the stone tablet dejectedly. Lighting up an orb, you are not qualified. Next. Light up 4 pearls, failed. Next. The team's test was carried out in an orderly manner. Unfortunately, none of the 20 or so people in front of them passed the test. This cruel result caused many of the juniors in the line to panic. This was because they realized that some of the stronger youths had been mercilessly eliminated. Their chances of passing had become extremely small. Light up 6 pearls, passed. Congratulations, stand behind the stone tablet first. The Shengzon disciple beside the stone tablet said in a much gentler voice. At this moment, 6 pearls lit up on the surface of the stone tablet. It was extremely dazzling in the eyes of the crowd. At this moment, the person who was taking the test was a young girl wearing a green dress. Perhaps she felt the envious gazes from the crowd. The young girl lifted her chin high like a proud peacock and went behind the stone tablet. Time ticked by. Soon, more than half of the team had completed the test. However, only 4 of them had passed. They were 2 men and 2 women. Among them, the highest was the one who managed to light up 7 orbs. The elimination rate of the stone tablet was so high that it was out of Zhuowen's expectations. There were at least 500 to 600 people in their team who had participated in the test. Now, more than half of them had passed, but only 4 people had passed. In front of the mountain gate, the black-robed man and elder stood side by side silently. Their gazes occasionally swept across the young boys and girls who were taking the test under the stone tablet. No one knew what they were thinking. Nalan Hongyu, who was standing beside the black-robed man, had been searching through the ranks with her beautiful eyes. Soon, she locked onto a figure at the end of the third group, and a bitter smile appeared on her face. And the figure that Nalan Hongyu had locked onto was none other than Zhuowen, who was leisurely waiting for the test. Within the group, Zhuowen naturally felt Nalan Hongyu's bitter gaze. However, he sneered in his heart. Originally, Zhuowen didn't care about Nalan Hongyu at all. After all, she was only an ultimate emperor stage cultivator. In Zhuowen's eyes, she was no different from an ant. Therefore, he didn't want to bother with her. But now, Nalan Hongyu's gaze made Zhuowen realize that she wouldn't let him off so easily. You'd better not provoke me. Otherwise, you'll regret it in the end, Zhuowen muttered to himself. He no longer paid attention to Nalan Hongyu. Nalan Hongyu was just a small fry. She didn't have the qualifications to be remembered by him, Zhuowen. You've lit up 5 orbs. You're not qualified. Next. The cold voice of a Shengzon disciple rang out once again. The youth in front of Zhuowen had a vexed expression on his face. He was only 1 orb away from passing. Zhuowen took a step forward and arrived in front of the testing stone tablet. He gently placed his right hand on the surface of the tablet. Immediately, he felt a strange energy spread out from the tablet and circulate through his meridians. Zhuowen's appearance attracted the attention of many people. After all, the strength that Zhuowen had displayed in his clash with Nalan Hongyu wasn't weak. Many people believed that this mysterious youth had the strength to enter Shengzon. Nalan Hongyu's beautiful eyes focused on Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes flickered and revealed a trace of resentment. CICICI. Instantly, the orbs on the surface of the tablet where Zhuowen was standing lit up one by one. In an instant, more than 6 orbs had been lit up. Moreover, the number of orbs was still rising rapidly. In an instant, 10 orbs on the surface of the tablet lit up at the same time. It was as if 10 scorching suns were releasing light and heat at the same time. It's actually 10 orbs. This kid has actually activated 10 orbs. The surroundings suddenly became silent. After the silence, there was an uproar. It was like a monstrous tsunami that resounded through the crowd. The lazy expression of the Glory Sect disciple who was in charge of the third stone tablet turned serious instantly. His gaze was fixed on the surface of the stone tablet. The 10 glowing pearls on the surface of the stone tablet froze on the spot. On the mountain gate, the black-robed man and old Bai, who were originally indifferent, also fixed their eyes on the third tablet. As the hosts this time around, they naturally knew very well how difficult it was to trigger the 10 treasured pearls on the testing stele. Thus, they did not have any hope that someone would be able to trigger the 10 treasured pearls. The probability of that happening was simply too low. But now, this scene had really happened in front of them. Nalan Hongyu was also stunned on the spot. The resentment in her beautiful eyes became more intense. She whispered a few words to the black-robed man beside her. The black-robed man frowned and his eyes flickered. My result should be considered as a pass, right? Looking at the stunned Shengzon disciple beside the tablet, Zhuowen had to remind him. The latter coughed a few times awkwardly and said with a smile, "Junior brother's talent is rare. You can actually activate 10 orbs. According to the rules, junior brother can directly become an inner disciple of Shengzon." The enthusiastic attitude of the Shengzon disciple was naturally seen by many people. However, there was no jealousy in their eyes. Instead, they were full of envy. This was because Zhuowen's result was too abnormal. It was out of everyone's reach. It was enough to break everyone's jealousy. Nodding his head, Zhuowen was not surprised at all. With his current strength, if he still couldn't activate the testing stone tablet, then his previous cultivation would have been in vain. Wait. Just as Zhuowen was about to lift his foot and walk behind the stone tablet, an untimely voice sounded, causing Zhuowen's foot to stop in midair. Raising his head slightly, Zhuowen stared at the black-robed man on the mountain gate and said indifferently, "What's the matter? It is said that you deliberately caused trouble in front of Shengzon's mountain gate and injured many people. Is this true?" The black-robed man looked down at Zhuowen and said indifferently. Zhuowen's eyes looked past the black-robed man and landed on Nalan Hongyu, whose face was full of resentment. He knew that the black-robed man's sudden call was probably related to Nalan Hongyu. At this moment, many people's eyes were focused on them, especially when they saw the black-robed man questioning Zhuowen. Everyone's eyes were full of interest. Just now, many people present were aware of the conflict between Zhuowen and Nalan Hongyu, and this black-robed man was Nalan Hongyu's second uncle. They were afraid that this young man was going to be unlucky. It was that group of people who provoked me first. Am I not allowed to defend myself? Zhuowen replied indifferently. The black-robed man shook his head and said, "Shengzon is the holy land of martial arts. How can we allow you to act like a madman and cause trouble here? Shengzon will not accept a disciple with such a bad character like you. Now, get out of here." As soon as these words were spoken, many people around were stunned. The young man in front of them was a genius who had lit up 10 pearls on the testing stone tablet. The black-robed man actually planned to drive such a genius out. Old Bai could not sit still and said to the black-robed man, "Brother Nalan, this child has lit up 10 pearls. It is a rare occurrence in 100 years. How can you act on your own initiative and drive him out of Shengzon?" Old Bai. So what if this child is talented? His character is too bad. Our Shengzon has spent so much effort to cultivate such a genius. I am afraid that we may not be able to get a reward in the future. It is not worth it to raise such an ingrate. The black-robed man shook his head and said that Zhuowen's character was not good. He had made up his mind to drive Zhuowen out. The smile on Nalan Hongyu's face became more and more intense. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuowen with a sense of victory. It was as if she was telling Zhuowen that offending her would not end well. Zhuowen was too lazy to pay attention to this unruly, willful, and ignorant woman. Instead, he looked at the black-robed man, took a step forward, and said indifferently, "Are you sure you want to drive me out? Then I can tell you clearly that the one who has a conflict with me is this bitch beside you. If you want to drive me out, then drive this bitch out as well. The smile on Nalan Hongyu's face instantly froze. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at Zhuowen as she said coldly, "What did you just say about me? I dare you to say it again." "I was only speaking the truth when I said you were a bitch," Zhuowen said indifferently. Nalan Hongyu almost went crazy when she heard this. Unfortunately, she didn't dare to go down and teach the young man a lesson because the strength he'd displayed just now was at least at the ultimate emperor realm. She was no match for him at all. "You actually dare to insult a disciple of our Shengzon's inner court in front of the Shengzon mountain gate. You have really gone against the heavens. Men, capture this rebellious kid. If he resists, kill him on the spot." The black-robed man narrowed his eyes. His expression had become unsightly when he heard Zhuowen call Nalan Hongyu a bitch. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As soon as the black-robed man spoke, the Shengzon disciples who were originally in charge of the stone tablet leaped up and surrounded Zhuowen. The tips of their swords were pointed at Zhuowen. Elder Bai frowned slightly and said, "Brother Nalan, there's no need to mobilize so many people. This kid did not do it on purpose. Let him go." Unfortunately, the black-robed man completely ignored Elder Bai. The black-robed man was much stronger than Elder Bai, and his status in the Shengzon was much higher than Elder Bai's. So, these Shengzon disciples basically listened to the black-robed man. Chapter 809. One move. Nalan Hongyu hasn't become an inner disciple of Shengzon yet, right? Could it be that I'm insulting all of you Shengzon disciples? Zhuowen said indifferently as he looked at the Shengzon disciples surrounding him. Nalan Hongyu raised her chin high as the corners of her mouth curled up. She sneered, "I'll definitely become an inner disciple. Insulting me now is the same as provoking Shengzon. Don't you think you deserve to die?" Hongyu is right. It's only a matter of time before she becomes an inner disciple. Who do you think you are? What right do you have to insult her? The black-robed man said coldly. Everyone looked at the young man surrounded by Shengzon disciples. They shook their heads and sighed. They never thought that something like this would happen during the opening ceremony. This young man is really unlucky. With his talent, he could definitely become an inner disciple of Shengzon. Unfortunately, everyone knew that the young man with peerless talent had offended Nalan Hongyu. Furthermore, Nalan Hongyu had a close relationship with the black-robed man. His chances of entering Shengzon were completely ruined, and he might even have to pay the price of death. Do you regret it? There are some people that you can't afford to offend. However, it's useless for you to regret it now. Your talent is indeed not bad. Unfortunately, Shengzon doesn't lack geniuses like you. Nalan Hongyu looked down at the young man from above. She assumed the posture of a victor. She wanted to see the young man in front of her reveal regret, anger, and other negative emotions. Unfortunately, the young man who was surrounded was extremely calm. His pair of indifferent eyes were like an unchanging stone statue. There wasn't the slightest hint of emotion in them. Putting on an act, huh? Second uncle, take down this rebellious fellow. Nalan Hongyu snorted coldly and said to the black-robed man beside her. The black-robed man nodded and waved his hand, "Take down this child. If he dares to resist, kill him immediately." "Yes." The 20 Shengzon disciples shouted in unison. They clenched their right hands, and sharp swords appeared in their hands. Then, they rushed toward Zhuowen with great tacit understanding. Looking around indifferently at the incoming Glory Sect disciples, Zhuowen's face was expressionless. He waved his right hand, and a bone spear appeared in his palm. Thud. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen turned into an illusory afterimage, instantly brushing past the encirclement. In the blink of an eye, the 20 Shengzon disciples who were encircled suddenly stopped in their tracks. They were like statues, motionless in the air, looking extremely strange. Whoosh. 10 meters away from the encirclement, a tall and straight figure slowly landed on the ground. His hand was holding a bone spear at an angle. At the tip of the spear, drops of bright-colored flower-like blood trickled down. Plop. Plop. Instantly, the 20 Shengzon disciples who had stopped in their tracks fell to the ground. A deep red line appeared on their necks, and they were all dead. A spear to the throat. Hiss, 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 hiss. Everyone gasped as they stared at the 20 Shenzon disciples who had fallen to the ground in disbelief. These 20 Shenzon disciples had all been killed in one move. The black-robed man and old Bai also stared blankly at the 20 Shenzon disciples' corpses. They did not expect that 20 Shenzon disciples would be killed just like that. These 20 Shenzon disciples were all elite disciples of the Shenzon. Their strength was around the level of the ultimate emperor realm, but now, they had been instantly killed by an ordinary youth. It was a little unbelievable. The smile on Nalan Hongyu's pretty face gradually faded. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at the 20 Shenzon disciples who had been instantly killed. She could not help but mutter to herself, 20 ultimate emperor realm cultivators were actually killed in an instant. Could it be my imagination? When she realized that it was not her imagination, the shock on Nalan Hongyu's face became even more intense. Even her delicate body could not help but tremble. How could this youth before her be so powerful? Originally, when this youth had instantly defeated the soldiers she had brought with her, she had thought that he was only a ultimate emperor realm cultivator. Now, it seemed that she had greatly underestimated this youth's strength. Me. Second uncle is still here. When the time comes, this kid will definitely be captured without a fight. Nalan Hongyu's heart only calmed down slightly when she glanced at the black-robed man beside her. After all, the black-robed man was an elder of the Shenzon, and his strength had reached the ultimate emperor realm. Nalan Hongyu did not believe that this youth before her could be stronger than the black-robed man. You dare to kill my Shenzon disciples? The black-robed man's eyes widened as he roared angrily. He stared fixedly at Zhuowen, as if he wanted to devour him. You ordered them to kill me, so why can't I kill them? Zhuowen sneered. He raised his head slightly and stared at the black-robed man with a mocking smile on his face. Who do you think you are? It's only right for our Shenzon to kill you, but for you to kill our Shenzon disciples, you deserve to die 1,000 times over. Today, you killed 20 of our Shenzon's elite disciples, so you can stay here forever. The black-robed man snorted coldly, and a terrifying aura erupted from him. His black robe fluttered even though there was no wind, and a strong wind whistled around his body. Elder Nalan is going to attack. I'm afraid this kid is in for it. Elder Nalan's status in Shenzon is quite high, and his cultivation is above the ultimate emperor realm. He is also one of the strongest in Shenzon. This youth has killed 20 Shenzon disciples. This is a disaster. Shenzon is the holy land of martial arts in this world. This kid is simply courting death by killing Shenzon's disciples. Many people were shocked when they sensed the sharp killing intent emitted from the black-robed man's body. Their gazes towards Zhuowen were filled with pity and regret. Originally, I just wanted to drive you out of Shenzon. Unfortunately, not only did you not listen, you even insulted our Shenzon disciples. And now, you are even more ruthless. You killed 20 of our Shenzon disciples. You deserve to die 1,000 times over. No one can save you today. The black-robed man stood in the air, looking majestic. He looked down at Zhuowen, and his voice was like thunder, rolling out. Nalan Hongyu's face flushed red. Her second uncle was finally going to attack. This young man in front of her was definitely going to die. Haha. Deserve to die 1,000 times over? Then you can try. Zhuowen pointed the tip of the bone spear at the black-robed man and said provocatively. As soon as these words came out, it caused an uproar. No one had expected this kid to dare to provoke the black-robed man at this juncture. Was he not courting death? Since you want to die so much, I will fulfill your wish. The black-robed man was so angry that he laughed. He put his palms together and a terrifying origin energy gathered in the void behind him. The origin energy surged out and turned into a huge black blade. Absolute black blade. With a low shout, the black-robed man took a step in the void and swooped down. He rushed toward Zhuowen with the huge black blade. Elder Nalan has used his strongest move, absolute black blade. It seems that he wants to kill this young man in front of him with one move. Looking at the huge black blade that appeared beside the black-robed man, many people's eyes were filled with astonishment. Absolute Black Blade was the black-robed man's ultimate move. Many people were quite familiar with it. Slightly raising his head, Zhuowen's eyes were still as calm as an ancient well. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen suddenly rushed up to the sky. The bone spear in his right hand shook, and a mysterious power of essence burst out. Whoosh! In an instant, Zhuowen and the black-robed man passed by each other as if they were strangers. There was no fierce confrontation, nor was there a hot-blooded collision. They just passed by each other calmly. Crack! Then, everyone's pupils shrank as they found that the black-robed man's absolute black blade had completely shattered into countless black fragments in front of everyone's eyes. Puff! The black-robed man spat out a mouthful of blood. His whole body was like a withered butterfly as he flew backward. His eyes were wide open and filled with disbelief. Even the black-robed man did not expect that his absolute black blade would be broken so easily. Moreover, it was not fancy at all. Boom! The black-robed man hit the ground dozens of meters away and spat out another mouthful of blood. His aura was extremely weak. Silence. At this moment, the whole area fell into an eerie silence. Regardless of whether it was the onlookers or Nalen Hongyu and Old Bai on the mountain gate, they were all stunned on the spot. Their gazes were all gathered on the miserable figure who had fallen to the ground and spat out blood dozens of meters away. Disbelief filled almost everyone's faces. The black-robed man, who was also the elder of Shengzon, was an expert whose strength was above the ultimate emperor stage. Now, he was fighting an ordinary youth and had been defeated in a single blow. When everyone realized that what was happening in front of them was not an illusion, the sound of people sucking in cold air could not help but resound one after another. No one was more shocked than Nalen Hongyu. At this moment, Nalen Hongyu was stunned on the spot. Her beautiful eyes stared at the defeated black-robed man as her delicate body trembled. How is this possible? Second uncle is an ultimate emperor stage expert. How could he have been defeated by this kid? This is impossible. It must be an illusion. Yes, it must be an illusion. Old Bai's mouth was slightly agape, but his heart was extremely shocked. The strength of the youth before him had already exceeded his imagination. Even the black-robed man had been defeated in a single blow. Elder Nalen, the person you want to drive away is a true monstrous genius. It's not worth it to offend such a genius. Old Bai shook his head and a trace of pity appeared in his eyes. The youth before him was too terrifying. If the black-robed man had not interfered and insisted on driving him out of Shengzon, this kid would have already become an inner disciple of Shengzon. Unfortunately, fate made fools of people. Now, because of the black-robed man, it was not very likely that this kid would be able to enter Shengzon. When he thought of this, Old Bai was extremely uncomfortable with the black-robed man's actions. Unfortunately, his status was not as high as the black-robed man's, and he did not have the right to speak as well. There was nothing he could do. Whoosh. Chapter 8-10. The 10 great elders. The black-robed man's pupils shrank to the size of needles as he looked at the young man who was charging at him with a long spear in his hand. His eyes were filled with fear. He could feel the strong killing intent from Zhuowen and knew that he was going to kill him. With a loud shout, the black-robed man took out a black talisman. On the surface of the black talisman, there was a picture of a bell and a cauldron. He crushed the talisman and countless black lights surrounded the black-robed man, forming a protective shield in the shape of a bell. Boom! The bone spear arrived on time and instantly hit the surface of the shield. Countless sparks flew out along with the sound of metal clashing. This shield is strange. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and looked surprised as he stared at the shield in front of the black-robed man. Thump! 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 The black-robed man retreated dozens of steps under the recoil of the bone spear. He looked at the young man in front of him with fear and said coldly, "This is the Bell Cauldron Talisman, a protective item given to our Shengzon elder by the Holy Master. Not only did you kill our Shengzon disciples, but you also forced me to use the Bell Cauldron Talisman. Your actions are disgraceful. Now, let me give you a piece of advice. Surrender immediately and follow us to the main hall of the Glory Sect." At that time, The Holy Master may be lenient with you. Zhuowen sneered and said, "You are like a stray dog now. Do you have the right to ask me to surrender? Moreover, do you really think that I can't kill you with the Bell Cauldron talisman?" With that, Zhuowen took a step forward and arrived in front of the black-robed man. He swung the bone spear in his hand and a mysterious power spread out, increasing his strength by several times. Bang! The black-robed man, who was inside the Bell Cauldron talisman, was caught off guard and was hit by the bone spear. He was sent flying like a ball. Boom! Smashing into the ground, the black-robed man spat out a mouthful of blood. His gaze was extremely gloomy. Although the Bell Cauldron talisman could neutralize most of the attacks, a portion of the attacks would still pass through the Bell Cauldron talisman and reach the black-robed man, causing his injuries to worsen. Bang bang bang! Before the black-robed man, who had just landed on the ground, could recover from his shock, Zhuowen rushed over once again. The bone spear in his hand unceremoniously lifted him up. Immediately, the black-robed man was like a rubber ball, being hit back and forth in the air. Moreover, every attack caused his injuries to worsen. At this moment, how could the black-robed man not know that this young man's goal was to exhaust him to death within the Bell Cauldron talisman through repeated attacks? The surrounding crowd looked at the man in the black robe who had no strength to resist. Their eyes were almost numb. At this moment, the high and mighty elder of Glory sect was being abused by an ordinary young man right in front of their eyes without any strength to resist. "Young friend, you can't kill Brother Nalan. Otherwise, Shengzon will not let you go." Seeing the black-robed man in such a sorry state, Old Bai could not stand it anymore and tried to persuade him. Zhuowen's gaze was cold and he completely ignored Old Bai's words. This black-robed man had tried to kill him many times. How could he, Zhuowen, let him go easily? Bang bang bang! Zhuowen's hands were not slow. They were still tirelessly bombarding the Bell Cauldron talisman. The black-robed man, who was inside the Bell Cauldron talisman, looked even more dispirited and the fear in his eyes became even more intense. In the mountain gate, Old Bai's gaze flickered. He stomped his foot and directly rushed into the mountain gate. He intended to inform Elder Shengzon of the situation here. Zhuowen naturally noticed Old Bai's departure. He did not deliberately stop him. Instead, he slowly swung his bone spear and sent the black-robed man flying again and again, causing the black-robed man to feel even more humiliated. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Swoosh 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 swoosh. Suddenly, 12 figures appeared in the mountain gate. These figures were led by 2 men with extremely powerful auras. They were dressed in red and green robes respectively. The red-robed man was about 30 years old. The corners of his mouth were full of stubble. His eyelids were drooping and he looked slightly dispirited. The green-robed man was a stooped old man. The aura that these 2 men exuded was extremely powerful. The left and right protectors of Shengzon. The left and right protectors are actually here. Looking at the 2 men leading the group, everyone's eyes were filled with shock. The left and right protectors were powerful existences in Shengzon, second only to the Holy Master. Their strength was above the 4 Reverends' realm and they had a unique position in Shengzon. Look, the people behind the left and right protectors are the 10 great elders of Shengzon. This formation is too terrifying. Soon, many people's eyes noticed the 10 figures behind the left and right protectors. These 10 people were the 10 great elders of Shengzon. They were the top 10 elders in Shengzon. Haha. Boy, you're finished. I, the left and right protectors of Shengzon, have brought the 10 great elders here. You'll definitely die. If you know what's good for you, you'd better let me go immediately. Perhaps we'll leave your corpse intact in Shengzon. The black-robed man also noticed the sudden arrival of the left and right protectors. He couldn't help but laugh maniacally. His gaze towards Zhuowen was filled with mockery. The left and right protectors were very strong. They were both at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm, and the 10 great elders weren't weak either. They were all at the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. This kind of formation was enough to crush any ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. They could even crush some of the weaker Xuanzuan realm cultivators. The black-robed man admitted that Zhuowen was very strong. However, in his opinion, No matter how strong Zhuowen was, he couldn't possibly be a Four Reverends realm cultivator. Therefore, he knew that Zhuowen was dead meat the moment the left and right protectors arrived. Let you go. Looks like you're overthinking things. Zhuowen shook his head. With a flick of his right hand, the bone spear pierced through the black-robed man's bell and cauldron talisman at a tricky angle like a viper. Clang. The crisp sound of metal clashing resounded. At the same time, the tip of the bone spear erupted with a demonic blue light. Zhuowen no longer held back this time. He pushed his spear intent to the limit, and the bone spear reached an unprecedented level of sharpness. It's useless. You've struck the bell and cauldron talisman so many times, but you still couldn't break it. It won't be the same this time. The black-robed man laughed loudly. His eyes were filled with mockery. That's not necessarily true. Zhuowen remained expressionless. He clenched his right hand, and the demonic blue light at the tip of the spear suddenly shot out. It spread in all directions, turning into an endless number of blue spear shadows. The bone spear's power had also reached its peak. Crack. A crisp sound rang out. The cracks on the surface of the bell and cauldron talisman gradually spread. In the end, the talisman shattered into countless pieces under the black-robed man's shocked gaze. Spurt. The shadow of the spear flashed past, and a severed arm soared into the sky, dripping with blood. Ah! The black-robed man clutched his empty right arm and screamed hysterically. However, there was more fear on his face. The bell and cauldron talisman that he was so proud of had actually been so easily broken at this juncture. He truly could not believe it. Looking at the spear-wielding youth before him with a cold gaze, the black-robed man finally felt fear. He was afraid, and even regretted. Of all the things he should never have done, why did he provoke such a fiend? Don't kill me. I'm Elder Shengzon. The left and right protectors are right there. If you kill me, the left and right protectors will definitely not let you off. Clutching his empty right arm, the black-robed man continuously retreated. His entire body trembled, and his voice trembled. Don't worry, I won't kill you, Zhuowen shook his head. The words that he spat out immediately caused the black-robed man to sigh in relief. As long as he did not die, the left and right protectors would definitely be able to save him. At that time, it would not be too late to take revenge. Boom! A pure white palm suddenly slammed into the black-robed man's lower abdomen. A strong wave of yuan power invaded the black-robed man's body and directly shattered the dantian in his abdomen. You actually destroyed my dantian? Spitting out a mouthful of blood, the black-robed man's pupils shrank. He stared blankly at the indifferent youth in front of him. His eyes gradually filled with blood, and his chest was filled with anger. With his dantian destroyed, he would be a complete cripple in the future. For him, this was simply a fate worse than death. Slowly withdrawing his palm, Zhuowen said indifferently, I said that I won't kill you, but I will destroy you. This is the price you should pay. Boy, let go of Elder Nalen. A loud shout suddenly sounded. The left and right protectors above the mountain gate had already led the 10 great elders and descended in the air not far from Zhuowen. Ha ha! I'll return this piece of trash to you. Zhuowen smiled faintly, raised his foot, and fiercely kicked the black-robed man's chest. Instantly, the latter's waist bent like a shrimp, and he flew out and was caught by the left and right protectors. The left and right protectors' right hands moved and caught the black-robed man. When they discovered that the black-robed man's dantian had been destroyed, their eyes suddenly became extremely gloomy. You actually dared to destroy Elder Nalen's dantian? Don't you know that Elder Nalen is a member of our Shengzon? Your courage is really big. The right protector, who was slightly older, shouted loudly in shock and anger. Protectors, you have to make a decision for me. This boy is really too hateful. He actually dared to destroy my dantian, and the 20 elite disciples we sent this time were also killed by him. This boy deserves to die. The black-robed man hysterically shouted. The left protector frowned slightly and said lightly, Elder Nalen, don't worry. This boy dared to kill the disciples of our Shengzon, and even destroyed Elder Shengzon's dantian. If we don't kill him, how can we serve as a warning to others? As he spoke, The left protector ordered the 10 elders behind him, 10 elders, take action and capture this child. Yes. The 10 great elders nodded and stomped their feet, turning into 10 shadows. Suddenly, they surrounded Zhuoan, and the terrifying momentum of the early stage of the Xuanzuan realm swept out violently. The 10 great elders of Shenzhen. It's too terrifying. This boy is finished. With such a lineup, it's unlikely that he can escape. The surrounding people discussed animatedly, shaking their heads and sighing. Kill. Chapter 8:11. 10 Direction Soul Killing Formation. The auras of the 10 great elders instantly locked onto Zhuoan like invisible chains, binding Zhuoan to the spot. Bang! Suddenly, the attacks of the 10 great elders bombarded Zhuoan's body. Dazzling rays of light burst out like the sun, stimulating the crowd to squint their eyes. Then, an earth-shattering explosion resounded. The 10 great elders have taken action. This kid can't escape the fate of death in the end. Many people in the surroundings shook their heads and sighed. The 10 great elders were all experts in the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. When they joined forces, they could erupt with earth-shattering power. No one thought that the young man could survive such a joint attack. Bang! 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 Suddenly, continuous muffled sounds rang out from the explosion in the sky. Then, 10 figures in a sorry state retreated from the explosion. They barely managed to stabilize their bodies after retreating dozens of steps. Weren't these 10 figures the 10 great elders who had joined forces to deal with Zhuoan? At this moment, the pupils of the 10 great elders shrank and their breathing quickened. There was a trace of blood at the corner of their mouths. They had been injured in the confrontation just now. What's going on? How could the 10 great elders be repelled when they joined forces to attack? Everyone was stunned when they saw the 10 great elders' sorry state. Could it be that the mysterious young man was the one who had caused the 10 great elders to be in such a state? Boom! A beam of golden light shot out from the explosion. Then, a 3-meter-tall figure with 3 heads and 6 arms suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It looked like a god or a devil. Is this the young man from before? How did he become like this? Looking at the 3-headed and 6-armed figure that suddenly appeared in the sky, everyone's eyes flickered and revealed a look of astonishment. The 10 great elders being repelled was also beyond the expectations of the left and right protectors. The black-robed man that the left and right protectors had placed at the foot of the mountain gate was even more stunned. He stared at the godlike figure with a complicated gaze. Only now did he realize that the young man in front of him had not used his full strength at all when they were fighting just now. Now, even the 10 elders were forced back by him. How powerful did he have to be to achieve this? The left and right protectors looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The young man in front of them looked to be around 20 years old, but he actually had the strength to repel the 10 great elders. This kid's strength and talent were a little too terrifying. Form the 10 Direction Soul Slaughter formation and completely suppress this kid, the left protector said coldly. Now, the left and right protectors' killing intent towards the young man in front of them had weakened a lot. They only wanted to capture him alive and make him submit to Shenzhen. They knew very well that this young man possessed such strength at such a young age and had a bright future ahead of him. They had to make use of this young man for their Shenzhen. If it didn't work, then they could only kill him. The 10 elders nodded. They immediately stabilized themselves and stood in 10 different positions around Zhuoan. Their hands rapidly formed hand seals and a terrifying power burst out from their bodies. 10 Direction Soul Slaughter formation, there is nowhere to hide. With a low shout, the armor souls in the 10 elders' bodies were released. Under their own power, they formed a terrifying physical body. Moreover, the armor souls of the 10 elders were surprisingly the same. They were all huge and mighty stone statues. The 10 stone statues were arranged in 10 different directions. A mysterious and terrifying power soared into the sky from the 10 stone statues. It actually turned the surrounding area of several dozen miles into a boundary. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless blood-red threads burst out from 10 different directions and rushed towards Zhuoan, who was in the center. These threads were too fast. Before Zhuowen could react, these terrifying blood-red threads had completely bound his limbs. They are actually absorbing the origin energy in my body. The moment the blood-red threads bound him, Zhuowen immediately felt a suction force coming from the blood-red threads and absorbing the origin energy in his body bit by bit. It's Shengzon's 10-direction soul slaughter formation. The 10 elders have even used such a formation. It seems that this young man is indeed terrifying. However, it will end here. Looking at the boundary suspended in mid-air, many people recognized that it was Shengzon's famous 10-direction soul slaughter formation. This formation's power was unparalleled. Although the mysterious young man was very strong, no one was optimistic about him. Swoosh! The left and right guardians instantly arrived above the 10-direction soul slaughter formation and looked down at Zhuowen in the town. The left guardian said indifferently, "Why are you deliberately causing trouble in front of our Shengzon's mountain gate? With your talent, joining our Shengzon would be the icing on the cake." Slightly raising his head, Zhuowen sneered and said, "You're asking me why I'm deliberately causing trouble? I can clearly tell you that I'm here to join your Shengzon. Unfortunately, some people insist on driving me out." You're here to participate in Shengzon's mountain opening ceremony? What's the result of your test? And who dares to drive you out? The right guardian frowned slightly. After listening to Zhuowen's words, it seemed that there was indeed something fishy. It would be best if such a young man with such strength and talent could join their Shengzon. Who would be stupid enough to drive such a genius out? 2 guardians. This little brother's test result is that he has lit up 10 pearls. His talent is absolutely first class. Moreover, you've seen his strength. It's already comparable to the Xuanzuan realm. Suddenly, from the crowd below, a middle-aged man with a cold expression came out. He glanced at Zhuowen, who was in the 10-direction soul-killing array, and pleaded for him, which was rare. After Zhuowen displayed such great strength, quite a few people felt some admiration for him. Moreover, they were extremely displeased with the black-robed man abusing his power for personal gain and trying to drive away a genius like Zhuowen. If the black-robed man hadn't been crippled, they might not have dared to say anything. However, the black-robed man had been completely crippled by Zhuowen. In the future, he would be a complete waste. Naturally, they had no scruples. "Oh, you actually lit up 10 pearls? With such a result, you should be an inner disciple of our Shengzon. How did things develop to this point?" The left guardian's eyes flashed as he continued to ask. "It's all because of that elder Nalan. Not only did he directly promote his niece, Nalan Hongyu, to an inner disciple, but because of the conflict between this little brother and Nalan Hongyu, he actually planned to drive this little brother out of Shengzon. That's why things have developed to this point." The crowd below the mountain gate scrambled to speak up for Zhuowen. Moreover, they all pointed the spearhead at the black-robed man. "Oh, is there such a thing?" The left guardian's eyes became even gloomier. He turned his head and coldly stared at the pale-faced black-robed man behind him. In his heart, he cursed the black-robed man for being brainless and stupid. He actually dared to drive away such a genius. Nalan Xiong, is what they said true? The left and right guardians turned around at the same time and stared indifferently at the black-robed man. 2 guardians, they are definitely talking nonsense. It's clearly this boy who took the initiative to cause trouble in front of the mountain gate. My second uncle only wanted to go forward and stop him, but he never thought that this boy would launch a sneak attack and heavily injure my second uncle. This boy is despicable and shameless. We can't let him go. A sharp voice rang out. Nalan Hongyu had appeared in front of the black-robed man at some unknown time. She pointed at the 10-direction soul-kill formation and accused him. Zhuowen's lips curled into a cold smile when he saw Nalan Hongyu acting like a shrew. This Nalan Hongyu really was big-breasted but brainless. She actually dared to make such baseless claims at a time like this. Wasn't she just courting death? As expected, the left and right guardians' eyes gradually turned cold when they heard this. The left guardian said coldly, "You're saying that this little brother launched a sneak attack on your second uncle, and that's why he's in such a sorry state? But this little brother doesn't even fear the combined might of the 10 great elders." Does your second uncle, a mere ultimate Emperor realm cultivator, need him to launch a sneak attack on him? Nalan Hongyu's face froze. The Left Guardian's words immediately left her speechless and her face pale. That's right. Zhuowen didn't even fear the combined might of the 10 Great Elders. His strength had long surpassed the ultimate Emperor realm. Did he really need to launch a sneak attack on her second uncle? You're really full of nonsense. I've heard that Elder Nalan wants to promote you to an inner disciple. You're almost 25 years old, but you're only a mere ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. What right do you have to become an inner disciple of Shengzon? The Left Guardian's voice grew colder and colder. Nalan Hongyu couldn't help but back away. Her pretty face was drained of blood. She knew that it was all over. You've really lost face for our Shengzon. Nalan Xiong, you've abused your power for personal gain and even chased away a genius disciple. You've already committed a great taboo of the Shengzon. From now on, you're no longer an elder of the Shengzon. Take your niece and get out of Shengzon immediately. The Left Guardian flicked her sleeve as she spoke coldly. Then, the black-robed man in front of the mountain gate revealed a dispirited expression and a miserable smile appeared on his face. He knew that everything was over for him. Not only had his Dantian been destroyed, he'd also been chased out of Shengzon in front of everyone. His life had been ruined. Second uncle, Nalan Hongyu looked at the black-robed man in panic. She didn't know what to say. Don't call me second uncle. Nalan Hongyu, because of you, I've become a cripple. Now, I've been chased out of Shengzon. You're really something. The black-robed man laughed loudly. He took out a dagger from his robes and slit his throat. Blood splattered everywhere. The black-robed man's current situation was worse than death. He'd rather die. Nalan Hongyu knelt on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. She finally regretted her actions. She shouldn't have provoked Zhuowen. If she hadn't done so, none of this would have happened. Unfortunately, it was all too late now. What was the use of regretting? Looking at the black-robed man who'd committed suicide, many people below the mountain gate shook their heads and sighed. Because of Nalan Hongyu's selfishness, the black-robed man's life had been completely ruined. This really made people sigh with regret. The Left and Right Guardians' faces were grave and stern. Then, they looked at Zhuowen, who was inside the 10-direction killing formation, and said indifferently, Nalan Xiong has already committed suicide. Now, it's your turn. Although you're only defending yourself, you've still killed many people from Shengzon. This debt won't be forgotten so easily. Chapter 8:12. Breaking into Shengzon. You want me to surrender and leave my life in the hands of your Shengzon? Do you think that's possible? Zhuowen sneered as he stood within the Shifang soul-killing formation. You can't even protect yourself now, and you still dare to disobey? The Left Protector said coldly. Zhuowen shook his head and said indifferently, I will go up to the Shengzon main hall, but I won't be dragged up there by you. I will be the one to break into it. As he spoke, Zhuowen let out a loud shout, and an even more blazing golden light burst forth. His entire form changed from 3 heads and 6 arms to 4 heads and 8 arms. Rumble. An extremely terrifying power burst out from Zhuowen's body. Then, the countless blood-red threads that the Shifang soul-killing formation wrapped around Zhuowen's body were all torn apart. Let's break it. Zhuowen roared at the sky. His 8 arms hammered into the air, and a terrifying power spread out in all directions with him as the center. Cracks began to appear in the space. Crack. A crisp sound resounded. The boundary formed by the Shifang soul-killing formation collapsed completely at this moment. The 10 stone statues were also unable to withstand such a terrifying power and were completely shattered into pieces. Fart. The 10 elders sitting on the stone statues spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying in all directions. They looked extremely dispirited. Their eyes were filled with intense disbelief and fear. The decapitation soul-killing formation had actually been broken just like that. This young man is too terrifying. Has he been hiding his strength from the beginning? Did he only use his full strength now? The Left and Right Protectors were both shocked and furious. They had not expected this young man to be so daring as to break into Shenzhen. What shocked them even more was that the 10-directional souls killing formation was actually broken by him. The strength of this child somewhat exceeded their expectations. A red and a blue chi burst out from the bodies of the two protectors and turned into a red and blue disk in the void. A terrifying aura that could shake the heavens and earth was emitted from the red and blue disk, faintly causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Heaven and earth disk, only I am supreme, the left and right protectors shouted. The huge red and blue disk rumbled towards Shuo when with a frightening might and noise. Wherever it passed, space collapsed. It was an extremely frightening sight. This spear has a soul, it's called spear intent. Zhuoan gave a loud shout as his 8 arms simultaneously unleashed the great perfection spear intent. Suddenly, countless blue crystals condensed and formed a huge and mighty blue spear in front of him. Whoosh! Like an arrow leaving the bowstring, the blue spear suddenly shot out, tearing through the void, and instantly slammed into the red and blue disk in the void. Rumble. A terrifying explosion suddenly resounded at this moment. The huge blue spear and the rotating red and blue disk instantly collided in the void, and then both of them stagnated. Break it for me. 8 arms holding 8 spears. Zhuoan stepped on the void and turned into a ray of light arrow. In an instant, he reached the handle of the blue spear in the sky. Then, his 8 arms smashed down heavily again. The power that erupted from this smash was earth-shattering, almost causing the surrounding void to shake violently. Then, traces of cracks appeared on the surface of the red and blue disk that was in a deadlock in the air. Crack. In the end, the red and blue round plates were completely shattered into countless pieces in front of everyone's eyes. The blue long spear was like a hot knife through butter as it directly rushed out. In an instant, it rushed towards the left and right protectors, who were still stunned. Left protector, let's join forces to block this blue spear. The right protector was the first to react. He hurriedly shouted and swung his right hand, causing a red force to surge out. The left protector's movement was not slow either, and a blue force also swept out from his body. The blue and red forces intertwined and turned into a Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern, revolving in front of the two of them, wanting to completely block the blue spear. Boom! The blue spear's power was indeed terrifying. When it pressed against the Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern, it actually caused the pattern to shake continuously, causing the left and right protectors to feel uneasy. Bang! In the end, due to the lack of energy, the blue spear completely disappeared under the Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern. As the left and right protectors heaved a sigh of relief, a piercing sound suddenly swept out. They did not know when Zhuoan had actually appeared above them. His 8 arms were wrapped in a monstrous aura, and he suddenly smashed down, causing the two of them to be frightened and their hearts to beat rapidly. Rumble. This time, Zhuoan had truly used all of his strength. Together with the peak of spear intent, he had unleashed the power of this attack to the extreme. Without exception, the Tai Chi 8 trigrams pattern in front of the left and right protectors was directly shattered. Then, a cold bone spear's shaft heavily smashed into the left and right protectors' chests. Puff! Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, the left and right protectors spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out, smashing into the mountain gate. At this moment, the entire mountain gate became silent. No one made any sound. They only held their breaths and silently watched this scene. After a long period of silence, uproar, noise, and discussion swept out continuously from the foot of the mountain, in the sea of people. The left and right protectors in addition to the 10 great elders. With such a powerful lineup, the crowd originally thought that they would be able to take down the young man in front of them. However, the result that appeared before them now greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. The Shifang soul-killing array formed by the 10 great elders had been broken. The left and right protectors had joined forces but were also defeated. Now, they were in a sorry state like stray dogs. Too powerful. The strength displayed by this young man in front of them was too powerful. At the foot of the mountain, many young juniors stared at Zhuoan's figure. Their eyes were full of admiration. Zhuoan's age was not much different from theirs. However, he was able to defeat the 10 great elders and the 2 great protectors of Shenzhen. This kind of achievement was simply the dream of these young boys and girls. Now that Zhuowen had achieved it, these juniors could not help but put themselves in Zhuowen's shoes. Instead, their faces were more excited and happy than Zhuowen himself. Zhuowen no longer paid attention to the left and right protectors. He stepped forward and entered the mountain gate. He only had one purpose for this trip. That was to find the Enlightenment Cliff of Shenzhen and stay there for 3 years. From there, he could comprehend the general trend of heaven and earth to deal with the invasion of the demonic creatures 3 years later. Left and right protectors. This kid has trespassed into Shenzhen. What should we do? The 10 great elders gathered in front of the left and right protectors at the mountain gate. Their expressions were not very good. To think that their Shenzhen was so famous. Today, a kid who smelled like milk had barged in. This was a ruthless slap in the face. Let's go and inform the Lord Holy Leader. This kid is too arrogant. He actually dares to trespass into Shenzhen. He absolutely cannot be forgiven. The left and right protectors' expressions were gloomy. They coldly snorted and rushed into the mountain gate. Clearly, they were planning to inform the Lord of Shenzhen. Lord Holy Leader? The 10 great elders looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with shock. The Lord of Shenzhen's whereabouts had always been mysterious. He was elusive and elusive. He was extremely mysterious. Perhaps only the left and right protectors, whose positions were second only to the Lord Holy Leader, knew his whereabouts. Now that the left and right protectors had spoken, it was likely that the Lord Holy Leader was really going to come out of the mountain. With that, the 10 great elders turned into phantoms and disappeared from the mountain gate. Very quickly, they were submerged in the misty clouds. At this moment, the people at the foot of the mountain were the most shocked. They were all stunned on the spot. With such a thing happening in Shenzhen today, the mountain opening ceremony was no longer meaningful. This was especially true for the juniors who had passed the test. At this moment, all of them had long faces. Because of Zhuowen, they had been completely ignored. Shenzhen had no time to care about them. It was also impossible for him to arrange for someone to bring them into Shenzhen. Who is that young man? What is his purpose in trespassing into Shenzhen? All of these doubts lingered in everyone's hearts. They were itching to find out more, but no one dared to take a step into Shenzhen's mountain gate. A long time ago, Shenzhen had stipulated that those who were not from Shenzhen were not allowed to enter Shenzhen. Once they did, they would be killed without mercy. The moment he stepped into the mountain gate, Zhuowen was presented with a white staircase that led upwards. Above the staircase, there was a white fog that blocked his vision. It looked mysterious and beautiful. Shenzhen should be at the end of this staircase, Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. With a flick of his right hand, a white uniform suddenly appeared in his hand. This white uniform was secretly put away by Zhuowen when he killed the Shenzhen's disciples. Although Zhuowen intended to break into Shenzhen, there was no need to be so ostentatious. This was because he knew that there were many powerful restrictions in Shenzhen. Moreover, there were many experts in Shenzhen. Although he could defeat the left and right guardians single-handedly, there were probably many warriors in the Xuanzuan realm in this huge Shenzhen. If they all attacked together, Zhuowen would have a hard time. In addition, Shenzhen also had the mysterious Saint Lord. He was very clear that the Saint Lord's cultivation was definitely higher than the left and right guardians. He might even be much stronger than the left and right guardians, so he had to be careful. After putting on the Shenzhen's disciple uniform, Zhuowen took a step and disappeared from the white staircase. Not long after Zhuowen left, the left and right guardians and the 10 elders rushed over. When they found that Zhuowen's figure was not on the staircase, their faces became extremely gloomy. This guy ran away pretty fast. The left guardian snorted coldly. The right guardian's eyes flashed and said, "Left guardian, let's join forces and go to the Saint Lord's mountain to ask for the Saint Lord's help." Yes. This kid's strength is indeed terrifying. If I'm not wrong, this kid's cultivation is at least at the early stage of the Supreme Being realm. Only the Saint Lord can suppress this kid. The left guardian nodded as he recalled Zhuowen's terrifying figure. Even now, he still felt a trace of lingering fear. This kid was too terrifying. Sigh. It said that this kid originally participated in the test to join Shengzon. Now that such a thing has happened, it's all Nailan Xiong's fault. He's really as stupid as a pig. One of the 10 elders said with some disappointment. The left guardian shook his head and said, since it has already happened, there's no need to mention it. What we have to face now is how to capture that young man as soon as possible. The left guardian is right. Let's go to the St. Lord's Mountain first. Chapter 8:13. Yarrow Zuiling. The clouds gradually dissipated, revealing a rather tall mountain peak in front of Zhuowen. However, the mountainside was as smooth as a mirror, as if it had been cut in half by a sharp arrow. Zhuowen raised his head and looked at the mountain peak. There were countless pavilions, terraces, and pavilions, and there was a huge platform at the top of the mountain. On the platform, many youths dressed in Shengzon disciple uniforms were practicing martial arts. It seems that this mountain peak is where the Shengzon disciples gather. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a hint of contemplation. He blended into the crowd of disciples at the foot of the mountain and walked up the mountain path. Soon, he reached the platform at the top of the mountain. At this moment, hundreds of Shengzon disciples were gathered on the platform. There were both male and female disciples, and most of them were holding swords. They were gesticulating back and forth, practicing sword techniques. There were also some who were practicing martial arts, and some who were sitting cross-legged and cultivating. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that the disciples on the platform were all above the Ultimate Emperor realm. The strongest among them was around the Ultimate Emperor realm. They could be considered the elite disciples of Shengzon. He also discovered that the disciples who were practicing martial arts on the platform had a faint trace of arrogance on their faces. The disciples standing around the platform all had looks of envy on their faces. At the same time, he also discovered that the disciples who were practicing martial arts on the platform were wearing different uniforms from the disciples around them. The former's white uniforms were inlaid with golden borders, while the latter's were inlaid with grey borders. I wonder when we'll be promoted from the outer sect to the inner sect. When the time comes, we'll also be able to practice martial arts on this platform. At the same time, we'll also be able to obtain the true teachings of Shengzon. Our cultivation will improve by leaps and bounds. It's not that easy to be promoted to the inner sect. It's said that to be promoted from the outer sect to the inner sect, one's cultivation must reach the Ultimate Emperor realm before the age of 25. Anyway, I'm almost 25. It's unlikely that I'll be able to meet this requirement. Sigh. This requirement is so harsh. I'm afraid I won't have any hope of being promoted. However, it's still an honor to be an outer sect disciple. At the very least, we'll be considered disciples of Shengzon. It'll be an identity for us to go out and train in the future. The surrounding disciples discussed animatedly. They looked at the inner sect disciples on the platform with eyes full of envy. At the same time, they sighed. They didn't have much hope of being promoted. In response to the sighs of the surrounding outer sect disciples, Zhuowen shook his head inwardly. These outer sect disciples' martial wills were too weak, and didn't have any desire to improve. If they continued to hold such negative thoughts, they would never be able to become an inner court disciple, let alone achieve anything in this lifetime. Of course, the purpose of Zhuowen's trip was the Enlightenment Cliff of Glory sect. Naturally, he would not say anything to these outer sect disciples. He pulled over an outer sect disciple who was passing by. The outer sect disciple was enraged because he was suddenly held back. Just as he was about to explode, he suddenly saw Zhuowen's inner sect disciple uniform. His face stiffened, and he hurriedly said respectfully, "Senior brother, do you have any advice for me?" The 20 Shengzon disciples brought by the black-robed man and elder by were all inner sect disciples. Therefore, Zhuowen was wearing the uniform of an inner sect disciple. "Do you know where the Shengzon Enlightenment Cliff is?" Zhuowen asked in a low voice. The outer sect disciple was surprised. He shook his head and said, "Senior brother, the Enlightenment Cliff is the most important thing in Shengzon. It's not something an outer sect disciple like me can know. In Shenzhen, only the core disciples and the elders of Shenzhen can enter the enlightenment cliff. Even the inner sect disciples aren't qualified. Hearing this, Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect the Shenzhen enlightenment cliff to be so strict that even the inner sect disciples weren't qualified to enter. Junior brother, can you tell me where I can find a core disciple? Zhuowen asked with a twinkle in his eyes. Hearing this, the outer sect disciple was embarrassed. He said, Senior brother, you don't know. The core disciples are the core geniuses of Shenzhen. There are only 10 of them in the whole of Shenzhen. It's impossible for us to know where they are. Oh, is there no one who knows? Zhuowen asked with a frown. There is, but this person is not easy to provoke. I advise senior brother to give up on this idea. The outer sect disciple shook his head. Junior brother, please tell me. This is a little token of my appreciation. I hope you don't mind. Zhuowen calmly took out a medium-level spirit stone from his spiritual ring and handed it to the outer sect disciple. There were many similarities between this world and the outside world. The currency was also spirit stones. For the outer sect disciples, medium-level spirit stones were quite precious. Looking at the medium-level spirit stone handed over by Zhuowen, the outer sect disciple's eyes widened. He quickly took it and put it in his arms. He looked around carefully. After he found that no one had seen him, he let out a sigh of relief and became extremely enthusiastic towards Zhuowen. Senior brother, do you see the woman in the middle of the martial arts practice field? The outer sect disciple pointed at the center of the martial arts practice field and whispered. Following the outer sect disciple's finger, Zhuowen naturally saw a slender and elegant figure in the middle of the martial arts practice field. She held a silver sword in her hand and was constantly brandishing it. The cold light of the sword constantly flashed. This young woman had an extremely delicate appearance. Especially when coupled with her enchanting figure as she danced with the sword, she attracted countless burning gazes from the surroundings. However, this woman's expression was extremely cold. There was also a trace of arrogance in her coldness, like a proud peacock dancing gracefully. This woman is called Yarrow Zueling. She is extremely talented. She is only 18 years old, but she is already an expert at the initial stage of the Six-Wheel Emperor realm. She is ranked 3rd among the inner sect disciples. The two people in front of her are both over 20 years old. In terms of talent, Yarrow Zueling can be called the number 1 in the inner sect. As the outer sect disciple spoke, his gaze was fixed on Yarrow Zueling. His eyes were filled with intense passion. Yarrow Zueling was extremely popular in Shenzhen. Many young disciples had pursued her. Unfortunately, she had extremely high standards and rejected many of them. Even the first and second inner sect disciples, Tai Ta and Yushi, were rejected by her. Senior brother, you are an inner sect disciple. You should know more about Yarrow Zueling than I do. However, there is one thing you definitely don't know. This woman has an elder brother called Yarrow Yang. Yarrow Yang is one of the top 10 core disciples. However, there are too few disciples who know about this. I only heard about it from an elder by accident. If you want to find out where the core disciples are, you can definitely find Yarrow Zueling. At this point, the outer sect disciple was slightly worried and said, Senior brother, you have to be careful. Although Yarrow Zueling looks delicate and weak, she is extremely decisive and ruthless when she fights. Senior brother, it's best if you don't provoke this woman too much. Zhuowen nodded and replied casually. However, his eyes were filled with intense light. It seemed that there was hope for him to find the Enlightenment rock wall. Thinking of this, Zhuowen lifted his foot and walked towards Yarrow Zueling in the middle of the martial arts practice field. Zhuowen's action immediately attracted the attention of many people. Basically, no one was within 10 meters of Yarrow Zueling in the middle of the martial arts practice field. However, Zhuowen's action was too obvious. It was obvious that he was walking towards Yarrow Zueling in the middle. Who is this guy? He actually dares to swagger towards junior sister Yarrow. How come I've never seen this guy before? This guy looks very unfamiliar. Quite a number of people narrowed their eyes and stared at Zhuowen, who was walking towards Yarrow Zuiling in an unfriendly manner. Some of the disciples, who were originally practicing martial arts, also stopped their actions as their gazes gathered on Zhuo Wen's body. When he was 5 meters away from Yarrow Zuiling, Zhuo Wen slowly stopped and calmly stared at the beautiful girl in front of him. Yarrow Zuiling also noticed the approaching Zhuo Wen. She stopped her sword dance and turned around. Looking at the ordinary-looking young man in front of her, she frowned and said, "If you want to express your love or confess, you can leave now. Insignificant inner sect disciples are not worthy of my attention." Zhuo Wen was startled. Before he could open his mouth, this Yarrow Zuiling actually said such a sentence. This made Zhuo Wen feel quite surprised. It seemed that this Yarrow Zuiling was indeed a hot potato in Shenzhen. She was usually very popular, but she was actually so familiar with this kind of situation. For a moment, Zhuo Wen was amused and deliberately said, "So the inner sect disciples are not worthy of Miss Yarrow's attention. Does that mean that in Miss Yarrow's heart, only the core disciples are worthy of you?" Yarrow Zuiling indifferently glanced at Zhuo Wen and coldly said, "That's natural. The inner sect disciples are just a bunch of good-for-nothings. With my aptitude, it's only a matter of time before I become a core disciple. The gap between me and the inner sect disciples will only grow bigger and bigger. How can they be worthy of me? You should leave on your own." Zhuo Wen shook his head and lightly smiled. "I agree with your words. I also think that the inner sect disciples are a bunch of useless trash. However, I'm not here to express my love for Miss Yarrow. I'm here to find your brother, Yarrow Yang." Yarrow Zuiling looked at Zhuo Wen with some surprise. She did not expect that the young man in front of her was actually looking for her brother and not her. For a moment, she revealed a trace of astonishment. "You know a lot, but my brother is a core disciple. What qualifications do you have to see him?" Yarrow Zuiling said with a heavy face. Zhuo Wen shook his head and smiled. "I just want to challenge Yarrow Yang. Since Miss Yarrow said so, does that mean that Yarrow Yang is afraid of a fight and deliberately used this kind of excuse to avoid a fight?" This Yarrow Zuiling in front of him was a little young. Zhuo Wen knew that if he spoke in a calm tone, there was an 80% chance that he would succeed. He could only use the method of provocation. Sure enough, as soon as Zhuo Wen spoke these words, Yarrow Zuiling clenched her fists and said coldly, "You're really shameless. You're even challenging my brother? You're really overestimating your ability. It looks to me like you might not even be a match for me. Then Miss Yarrow's words mean that if I defeat you, then you will take me to see Yarrow Yang?" Zhuo Wen said with a smile that was not a smile. Yarrow Zuiling gnashed her teeth in anger when she saw Zhuo Wen's appearance as if his scheme had succeeded. Even though she faintly felt that something wasn't right in her heart, she still couldn't restrain her anger, and she said coldly, "Exactly. If you're able to defeat me, then I'll bring you to see Big Brother." Zhuo Wen and Yarrow Zuiling's face-to-face conversation for such a long time also caused many of the surrounding disciples to be astonished. In the past, the disciples who expressed their love were basically rejected by Yarrow Zuiling and left dejectedly. Chapter 8:14. Core Disciple Who is this kid? How dare he approach Xueling? On the empty ground on the left side of the martial arts practice ground, a huge man who looked like a metal tower was waving an enormous meteor hammer. At this moment, he had also noticed Zhuo Wen, who was conversing with Yarrow Zuiling. There was not a single person within 10 meters of the giant man. There were quite a number of inner sect disciples who were staring at the giant man with fear. From the surrounding discussions, it was not difficult to tell that this person was the #1 iron tower in the inner sect. On the right side of the training field, there was a similar empty space. A cold man with a pair of triangular eyes stared at Zhuo Wen, who was in the center. His eyes were filled with coldness. This man was the second in command of the inner court, Yu Shi. Both Tai Ta and Yu Shi were once Yarrow Zuiling's suitors. However, the latter's standards were too high. She looked down on both of them. Although Yarrow Zuiling's rejection made both of them angry, they knew about Yarrow Zuiling's background. Her brother was a core disciple, Yarrow Yang. They could not afford to offend him. Therefore, they could only suppress their anger in their hearts. Fortunately, Yarrow Zuiling kept the other inner court disciples at arm's length. Therefore, although the two of them failed to express their love, they were not too discouraged. After all, everyone's outcome was the same. However, a young man they had never seen before was now so close to Yarrow Zuiling. Moreover, they were talking about a lot of things. This was something that they would not normally see. Therefore, Tai Ta and Yushi did not look too good. Both of them were the first and second in the inner court disciples. Even they could not talk much in front of Yarrow Zuiling. However, this unknown young man in front of them was talking to her for so long. Therefore, their gazes gradually turned cold. There was a trace of jealousy in their hearts. What right does this brat who stinks of milk have to get close to Xueling? Swimming Snake licked his lips and stamped his feet. His whole body was like a viper hunting its prey. He suddenly rushed toward Zhuowen at an extreme speed, turning into an afterimage. Originally, Tai Ta wanted to make a move. However, when he saw that Yushi had made the first move, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked like he was waiting to watch a good show. Yushi's strength was at the early stage of the ultimate six-wheel emperor realm. Although he was much weaker than Tai Ta, he was still an ordinary inner sect disciple. Tai Ta also wanted to see how the unfamiliar young man who was close to Yarrow Zuiling would end up under the attack of the swimming snake. At this moment, while Zhuowen was discussing the matter of the competition with Yarrow Zuiling, a sound that tore through the air suddenly flashed over. Then, Zhuowen acutely noticed that the corners of Yarrow Zuiling's mouth revealed a wisp of a mocking smile. Looks like I don't need to do anything. Someone has already done it for me. Let me warn you in advance. It's best if you know your limits. After saying this, Yarrow Zuiling quietly took a few steps back. The terrifying sound of something tearing through the air instantly swept through the martial arts arena. It attracted the attention of many Shengzon disciples. When they saw the figure that resembled a viper, their gazes immediately stiffened. However, when they saw the figure that roaming serpent had flashed out, their eyes were instantly filled with ridicule because the direction that roaming serpent had flashed out was exactly where Yarrow Zuiling was at the center of the training ground. They all knew that Yushi's target was probably the young man who was recklessly walking toward Yarrow Zuiling. Therefore, many people's eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Yushi actually made a move. That young man is going to suffer. Zhuowen still stood silently amidst the crowd's discussion. He'd already noticed the moment Yushi had made a move, but he didn't care. Or perhaps it could be said that he didn't care at all. So Miss Yarrow means that if I defeat the person behind me, you'll take me to see Yarrow Yang? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Yarrow Zuiling hadn't expected that the young man before her would be so calm and composed under such circumstances. A trace of doubt arose in her heart. Defeat Yushi first. Yarrow Zuiling shook her head and said ambiguously. Swoosh. At the same time, Yushi's figure instantly appeared behind Zhuowen. His right hand took the shape of a snake and swept towards Zhuowen's neck. This attack was very powerful, and it was enough to cripple an ordinary ultimate emperor realm cultivator. Unfortunately, just as Yushi's palm was about to reach Zhuowen's neck, a hand gently flashed out and suddenly pinched Yushi's palm. Crack. Yushi's face stiffened. The moment his palm was pinched, he felt as if he'd been bound by a sturdy iron hoop. He couldn't move at all. Then, a huge force came and the bones in his right hand were directly torn apart. Ah! Let go of me. Yushi screamed miserably. His wrist had been broken by Zhuowen. The pain of having his bones broken was extremely intense. He cried out in pain and suddenly struck out with his free left hand in an attempt to force Zhuowen to let go. However, Zhuowen shook his head and moved his shoulder. Yushi's body instantly became unstable and he was thrown to the ground by Zhuowen. Boom! Yushi crashed heavily to the ground and almost fainted. Then, a foot fiercely stomped on his chest. Zhuowen hadn't even glanced at Yushi from beginning to end. His gaze was fixed on Yarrow Zuiling as he said indifferently, Miss Yarrow, now that I've proven my strength, quickly take me to see Yarrow Yang. The martial arts practice field fell into silence. In this silent atmosphere, only Yushi's mournful screams could be heard. The second-ranked inner disciple, Yushi, had been defeated so easily by a strange disciple. Now, he was even being stepped on without being able to resist. At this moment, Yushi's face was full of humiliation. He was usually high and mighty as the second-ranked inner disciple and was revered by many inner disciples. However, today, in front of everyone, he was being stepped on by someone's right foot. This was a complete disgrace. Yarrow Zuiling was also stunned. She had never thought that Yushi would be defeated so easily. Yushi was slightly stronger than her. If even Yushi was defeated, didn't that mean that she would also be defeated if she were to fight with this young man? Yushi is only the second-ranked inner disciple. If you can defeat the first-ranked inner disciple, Tai Ta, then I'll take you to see my brother. Yarrow Zuiling was still somewhat unconvinced. Tai Ta. Sure, remember what you said. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Zhuowen coldly glanced at Yarrow Zuiling. A terrifying killing intent flashed across Yarrow Zuiling's eyes, causing her body to turn cold. She had never seen such cold and emotionless eyes. This young man in front of her was terrifying. Who is Tai Ta? Get out here. Zhuowen shouted at the martial arts practice field. As soon as these words came out, the crowd was in an uproar. This inner disciple who had suddenly appeared not only defeated the second-ranked inner disciple, Yushi, but also threatened Tai Ta to get out here. He was too arrogant. Deng. 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 A huge figure stepped out from not far away. This person was more than 10 feet tall and was as sturdy as Tai Ta. He held an exaggeratedly huge meteor hammer in his hands. This should be the first-ranked inner disciple, Tai Ta. At this moment, Tai Ta stared coldly at Zhuowen and said, "Do you think you can challenge me just because you defeated Yushi? You'd better not compare me to that trash, Yushi." When Yushi, who was being stepped on by Zhuowen, heard these words, he was so angry that he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. He glared fiercely at Tai Ta, who was not far away. Tai Ta's words were too impolite. He had said that Yushi was trash. Because of what had happened today, Yushi would not be able to lift his head up among the inner disciples anymore. It's all the same to me. Zhuowen shook his head and kicked Yushi away. With a stomp of his foot, he charged towards Tai Ta at an extremely fast speed. Seeing Zhuowen charging towards him, Tai Ta roared angrily. The meteor hammer in his hands danced quickly, and a terrifying gale swept up around his body. Whistling meteor. Tai Ta roared as countless gales swept out. Surging origin energy gushed out, forming countless meteor lights. Then, he swung both his hands, throwing the meteor hammers at Zhuowen. Zhuowen's gaze was as calm as ever. The instant the whistling meteor flew towards him, he extended his right hand and caught it. Then, Zhuowen clenched his fist, and the whistling meteor formed by the meteor hammer shattered. Whoosh! In an instant, Zhuowen arrived in front of Tai Ta. His right hand clenched into a fist and slammed into Tai Ta's chest. The crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. Tai Ta's pupils contracted, and his waist arched like a shrimp as he was sent flying. Boom! Tai Ta landed heavily on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was dispirited. Tai Ta was defeated in one move, and the surroundings fell silent again. The first and second-ranked inner disciples could not even take one move from this young man. Slowly walking towards Yarrow Zuiling, Zhuowen said indifferently, "It's time to bring me to Yarrow Yang." At this moment, Yarrow Zuiling slowly came back to her senses. She was still in shock. Tai Ta was defeated in one move. That was too much. Slowly coming back to her senses, Yarrow Zuiling's eyes flickered. She said coldly, "My brother is a core disciple. You're seeking your own death by challenging him. I think you should give up." Although Zhuowen had shown great strength, she still believed that Yarrow Yang was stronger. If Yarrow Yang was here, he could also defeat Yushi and Tai Ta in one move. "My patience is limited. If you don't bring me to Yarrow Yang, you'll end up in a worse state than Yushi and Tai Ta." Zhuowen did not want to play word games with Yarrow Zuiling. His voice became extremely cold, and a blood-red killing intent slowly flowed out from his body. Feeling the terrifying killing intent from Zhuowen's body, Yarrow Zuiling trembled. In this killing intent, she seemed to see a mountain of corpses, a sea of blood, and the Azura hell. How many people did this young man have to kill to release such a terrifying killing intent? Yarrow Zuoling's pretty face was pale. She lowered her head, not daring to look into Zhuowen's eyes. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with indifference and ruthlessness. It was a coldness that disregarded life. This coldness was very, very cold, and it made one's body tremble. "I'll bring you there." Biting her lower lip, Yarrow Zuoling finally gave in. Just the aura released by the young man in front of her was enough to make Yarrow Zuoling unable to resist. "That's good. Lead the way," Zhuowen said indifferently. His gaze relaxed, and the coldness on his body gradually disappeared. Chapter 8:15. Yarrow Yang. After reaching an agreement, Yarrow Zuoling led Zhuowen out of the martial arts practice field under the astonished gazes of many disciples. "Who is that young man? What a terrifying fellow." "That's right. Yushi and Tai Ta couldn't even withstand a single blow from him. When did such a terrifying disciple appear in Shenzhen?" After Yarrow Zuoling and Zhuowen left, many of the surrounding disciples began to discuss animatedly. They were extremely excited. Along the way, Yarrow Zuoling led the way while Zhuowen silently followed. The two of them didn't communicate at all as they walked in silence. Soon, the two of them walked out of the mountain peak. Zhuowen had already heard about the structure of Shenzhen when they were at the foot of the mountain. There were a total of 4 mountain peaks in Shenzhen. The peak that Zhuowen had entered was the Disciple Peak. Other than the Disciple Peak, the other 3 peaks were the Elder's Peak, the Sacred Master's Peak, and the Trial Crack. As the name implied, the Elder's Peak was naturally the peak where the Elder of Shenzhen resided. The Sacred Master's Peak was the peak where the Sacred Master of Shenzhen resided. As for the Trial Crack, it was a peculiar peak where the people of Shenzhen trained. When Yarrow Zuoling brought him to find Yarrow Yang, Zhuowen knew that the peak where the core disciples resided was on the Trial Peak. Moreover, Zhuowen suspected that the Enlightenment Rock Cliff of Shenzhen should be on the Trial Peak. After a while, Yarrow Zuoling stopped in front of a huge mountain peak. She turned her head and said coldly to Zhuowen, "This is the Trial Peak. My elder brother, Yarrow Yang, is training on this Trial Peak." Raising his head slightly, Zhuowen looked up at the strange mountain peak in front of him, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. The mountain peak in front of him was strangely shaped, and it was entirely crimson in color. There were 3 forks at the top of the mountain peak, and it looked like a flame symbol. At the foot of the mountain, there were 2 old men in grey robes lazily leaning against the mountain gate. They should be the guards of the mountain. However, these 2 grey-robed elders were not weak. They were both at the early stage of the ultimate 7-wheel emperor realm. At this moment, the 2 elders also noticed Yarrow Zuoling and Zhuowen. Their eyes lit up. "Why have the 2 of you come to Training Peak? As inner sect disciples, the 2 of you should know that the Training Peak is a forbidden area for you," one of the grey-robed old men said indifferently. Yarrow Zuoling cupped her hands respectfully and took out a talisman. She passed it to the grey-robed old man and said, "I'm Yarrow Zuoling. Yarrow Yang is my elder brother, and this talisman was given to me by my elder brother." When they heard Yarrow Yang's name, the 2 grey-robed old men's eyes narrowed slightly. They hurriedly took the talisman from Yarrow Zuoling's hand and examined it carefully. They nodded and said, "It is indeed Yarrow Yang's talisman. Since Miss Yarrow is Yarrow Yang's relative, you can enter. However, the person beside you." At this point, the grey-robed old man stopped talking. It was very obvious that Yarrow Zuoling could enter the Trial Peak, but Zhuowen, who was by Yarrow Zuoling's side, could not enter. Yarrow Zuoling's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of craftiness. She indifferently said to Zhuowen, "I've already brought you to the Trial Peak. Unfortunately, you don't have the qualifications to enter the Trial Peak, so you should return on your own." As she spoke, Yarrow Zuoling glanced at Zhuowen with schadenfreude. Under the gazes of the 2 grey-robed old men, she entered the mountain gate. She even turned around and gave Zhuowen a meaningful look before leaving Zhuowen. "Irrelevant people can leave," the grey-robed old man coldly said to Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and indifferently said, You said I'm irrelevant. I came with Yarrow Zuiling. Do you think I'm irrelevant? The grey-robed old man sneered and said, if she wanted to do something, why did she ignore you and leave you behind to enter the Trial Peak? Get lost. The Trial Peak is not a place you can enter. Is that so? Zhuowen was too lazy to talk nonsense with the two grey-robed old men. Since the Trial Peak was so close, how could he, Zhuowen, let it go so easily? With a step, Zhuowen turned into a lightning shadow. Under the astonished gazes of the two grey-robed old men, he instantly disappeared into the mountain gate. Before the two old men could even react, Zhuowen's figure had already disappeared. Seeing Zhuowen's figure disappear in an instant, the two grey-robed old men were stunned. They didn't even catch a glimpse of Zhuowen's shadow. What a fast speed. This kid is so arrogant. He actually dares to barge into the Trial Peak. Let's chase after him. After reacting, the two grey-robed old men's faces became extremely ugly. They looked at each other, turned into two grey shadows, and quickly rushed into the mountain gate. After entering the mountain gate, there was a precipitous mountain path that was like a thin line of sky. At this moment, Yarrow Zuiling was slowly walking within this thin line of sky. Her pretty face was already filled with a rich complacency. Who told that guy to scare me? Mph, I won't let him enter the Trial Peak. I'll just let him watch from the outside. Let's see what he can do. As Yarrow Zuiling spoke, she couldn't help but think of the terrifying killing intent that erupted from Zhuowen's body. That killing intent was very cold, terrifying, and sinister. She had never felt such a deep cold intent from anyone. Even her brother didn't have such a terrifying killing intent. She knew that the young man from before must have had an extraordinary experience. Whoosh! A lightning shadow swept past and stopped in front of Yarrow Zuiling. Then, Yarrow Zuiling's delicate body stiffened. She stared at the indifferent man who was looking down at her from above. Her entire body was stunned. She couldn't help but exclaim, "You actually barged into the Trial Peak? Where are the core disciples in the Trial Peak?" Zhuowen didn't directly answer Yarrow Zuiling's question. Instead, he silently stared at the latter and asked word by word. His voice started to become extremely cold. "Speak or die." A terrifying killing intent descended once again. Yarrow Zuiling's body couldn't help but tremble. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two grey shadows swept over from the bottom of the mountain path. The two grey-robed elders had also arrived. When they saw Zhuowen in the line of sky, they immediately shouted, "You have some guts. You actually dared to barge into the Trial Peak. Quickly, surrender. Take me to where the core disciples are. Otherwise, your end will be the same as these two old fellows." After indifferently spitting out these words, Zhuowen stomped his foot. Two blue spear shadows swept out from his body. Then, two pillars of blood spurted out. A bloody hole appeared between the eyebrows of the two grey-robed elders. Plop! The grey-robed elder didn't even make a sound. He fell down from the line of sky without any signs of life. He was clearly dead. "Ah! You killed the Trial Peak's gatekeeper elders?" Seeing the two grey-robed elders killed in an instant, Yarrow Zuiling's body trembled. She cried out in alarm. Her heart was extremely flustered. The man in front of her was actually so daring. He actually dared to kill the Trial Peak's gatekeeper elders. Was he not afraid of Shengzon's punishment? "Speak or die." Zhuowen's voice was still cold. It was so cold that Yarrow Zuiling's heart beat wildly. "I'll take you there. The core disciples are halfway up the Trial Peak. There are 10 floating stone platforms there. Those are the places where the 10 core disciples cultivate." Yarrow Zuiling had no choice but to compromise. The youth in front of her was too terrifying. Especially his ruthless methods of killing people. She knew that if she didn't speak, her fate would be the same as the two gatekeeper elders. They would both die. "Let's go." Zhuowen didn't hold back this time. Carrying Yarrow Zuiling in his right hand, he took a step forward and quickly flew up the Trial Peak. Under Yarrow Zuiling's guidance, Zhuowen quickly arrived at the halfway point of the Trial Peak. Halfway up the mountain, there was a huge open-air stone hall. Above the stone hall floated 10 dazzling stone platforms. On the 10 stone platforms, there were naturally 10 dignified figures. There were both men and women among the 10 figures. There were a total of 7 men and 3 women. Without exception, these 10 figures were the core disciples cultivating on the trial peak. Moreover, all of them were full of energy and had powerful cultivations. All of them were actually at the ultimate ninth wheel emperor realm or above. The strongest among them had already reached the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. The arrival of Zhuowen and Yarou Zueling immediately attracted the attention of the 10 people. When their gazes gathered on Zhuowen, they frowned slightly. This youth in front of them was too unfamiliar. They had never seen him before. Then, their gazes fell on Yarou Zueling, who was being carried by Zhuowen. Then, the other 9 people all had strange gazes. They all stared at the youth in a dark blue robe sitting in the center. This youth's aura was the strongest among the 10 people. He had reached the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. His other identity was Yarou Zueling's elder brother, Yarou Yang. At this moment, Yarou Yang's eyes narrowed. He stared at Zhuowen and said, "Who are you? Why are you carrying my sister?" "Oh, you're Yarou Zueling's elder brother, Yarou Yang? I was just looking for you." As he spoke, Zhuowen let go of Yarou Zueling. The latter ran to Yarou Yang's side in a panic. She stared at Zhuowen with reddened eyes. After all, she was a girl. Just now, Zhuowen had used such an indecent posture to carry her. How could she not feel humiliated? Now that she saw her elder brother, she felt even more wronged. Therefore, her eyes were clouded with a layer of mist. Seeing Yarou Zueling like this, Yarou Yang's gaze turned cold. He said coldly to Zhuowen, "How dare you treat Zueling like this? Are you looking for death?" "I'm not looking for death. I'm looking for you. Take me to the Enlightenment Cliff." "The Enlightenment Cliff should be within the trial peak, right?" Zhuowen said calmly. "The Enlightenment Cliff? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. How could someone like you enter the Enlightenment Cliff?" When Zhuowen mentioned the Enlightenment Cliff, a red-haired man sitting not far from Yarou Yang coldly mocked. "I'll only give you one chance. Either speak or die," Zhuowen said coldly. An obscure killing intent slowly brewed. "What an arrogant brat. You dare to be so arrogant when you barge into my trial peak. See how I'll teach you a lesson." Zhuowen's words immediately caused the gazes of the 10 core disciples to become much colder. They stared at Zhuowen and became extremely unfriendly. Among them, the red-haired man sneered again and again. He directly jumped out and flew towards Zhuowen. Bang! A muffled sound rang out. Zhuowen's right hand suddenly stretched out, and then all the attacks on the red-haired man's body were destroyed. Then, one hand easily grabbed the man's neck and lifted him off the ground. "I said, either speak or die. Since you don't want to speak, then die." Chapter 8:16. Holy Master. The crisp sound of bones cracking slowly rang out in the stone hall, causing the originally quiet atmosphere to become somewhat ear-piercing at this moment. The other 9 core disciples, including Yarou Yang, stared blankly at the red-haired man in Zhuowen's hand. His neck was crooked to the side. Although the red-haired man was not the strongest among the 10 core disciples, he was not at the bottom either. He was also an ultimate ninth wheel emperor, and his cultivation was already stronger than most of the elders in Shenzhen. But now, in the hands of the young man before him, he had been easily crushed to death with a single move. "Did you kill Liu Hua?" Yarou Yang asked with a cold gaze. Zhuowen did not waste any more words. With a stomp of his foot, the cultivation of the early Xuanzuan realm burst out. Countless streams of air surged out of Zhuowen's body like a tsunami, forming an upside-down waterfall. "You are also from the Xuanzuan realm?" Once Zhuowen's aura was released, Yarou Yang and the others could easily see through Zhuowen's current cultivation. Their eyes were filled with shock. The 10 core disciples were the geniuses of Shenzhen. However, Yarou Yang, who had the highest cultivation, was only in the early Xuanzuan realm. Moreover, Yarou Yang was already 23 years old, but the young man in front of them was only 20 years old. He was 3 years younger than Yarou Yang, but his cultivation was already the same as Yarrow Yang's. They all knew that the young man in front of them was much more talented than Yarrow Yang. "You are not a disciple of Shengzon?" Yarrow Yang's eyes flashed as he stared at the young man in front of him. He knew very well that it was unlikely that such a young Xuanzuan realm prodigy would appear in Shengzon. Even if Yarrow Yang knew about him, it was impossible for him not to know. "You can say that. Hurry up and bring me to the Enlightenment Cliff. Otherwise, you know the consequences," Zhuowen said calmly. Yarrow Yang's face was gloomy. He said coldly, "How dare you? You're not a disciple of Shengzon, yet you dare to break into Shengzon. You're courting death. And you want us to submit to you and listen to your commands in the Xuanzuan realm?" Zhuowen didn't waste any more words. With a stomp of his foot, his entire body transformed into an afterimage as he flashed towards Yarrow Yang. "Bastard, you actually dare to make a move. Everyone, let's capture this kid. He dared to kill our Shengzon's core disciple. We definitely can't let him go," Yarrow Yang shouted. With a stomp of his foot, he flashed towards Zhuowen. The young man in front of him was also a warrior of the Xuanzuan realm. Yarrow Yang naturally wouldn't be so stupid as to challenge him alone. Naturally, they would have to besiege him and take him down. The other 8 core disciples nodded. They all took out their respective spiritual treasures and greeted Zhuowen. In the stone hall, Yarrow Zueling was still standing. At this moment, she was also a little stunned. Only now did she realize that the young man who had just appeared in front of her was actually a Xuanzuan realm expert, an existence at the same level as her brother. "I underestimated him before." Yarrow Zueling shook her head, and her beautiful eyes contained a wisp of a complicated expression. Looking at the 9 people rushing towards him, Zhuowen's eyes were indifferent. With a flip of his hand, the bone spear appeared in his palm. At the same time, 3 pairs of thunder wings grew out of his back. With a stomp of his foot, his entire body transformed into an illusory thunder shadow. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Zhuowen immediately dodged the attacks of the 9 people. His figure flashed and arrived in front of a weaker man. With a shake of his bone spear, he swung it at the man's chest, causing him to spit out blood and fly backwards. Zhuowen's speed was too fast. With the support of 3 pairs of thunder wings, in addition to the Xuanzuan realm's support, Zhuowen's speed was far beyond that of those in the Xuanzuan realm. Even Yarrow Yang couldn't keep up with Zhuowen's speed at this moment. He could only watch as Zhuowen seriously injured him and the other 8 core disciples. Bang! 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 Suddenly, the 9 people besieging him, except for Yarrow Yang, were all hit by a powerful impact. They spat out large mouthfuls of blood and fell to the ground, rolling and struggling. They were seriously injured. Swoosh! With a flash of thunder, Zhuowen appeared in front of Yarrow Yang. He stared at the latter indifferently and said, "You are too weak. Take me to the Enlightenment rock wall and you will suffer less." Hearing Zhuowen's somewhat arrogant words, Yarrow Yang's anger surged. They were all warriors of the Xuanzuan realm, but Zhuowen actually said that he was too weak. This was a silent contempt. "That's not necessarily true," Yarrow Yang shouted angrily. Holding the flame feather fan spirit treasure, his right hand suddenly spun. Suddenly, endless flames swept out and turned into a huge fire python that was dozens of feet long. "Go!" With a wave of the flame feather fan, the huge fire python roared and rushed toward Zhuowen. For a moment, the temperature of the entire stone hall rose. However, when the fire python swept through the air, a blue spear shadow flashed and the fire python burst into countless sparks. Then Zhuowen instantly arrived in front of Yarrow Yang and fiercely swung the spear in his hand. Yarrow Yang didn't even have time to react. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest, and then his whole body flew out uncontrollably. He hit the rock wall around the stone hall and smashed a human-shaped hole. Whoosh! Yarrow Yang was struggling to get up when a cold light swept over. The tip of a bone spear was already in front of his roar. The sharp coldness caused Yarrow Yang to have goosebumps all over his body. "Take me to the Enlightenment rock wall." Zhuowen's voice was cold and ruthless. Yarrow Yang was stunned. He didn't expect that the young man in front of him, who was also at the early stage of the Xuanzuan realm, would be so strong. Even the 9 core disciples were no match for him. Let go of my brother. Yarrow Zuiling was stunned at first, and then screamed. She came to Yarrow Yang's side and stared at Zhuowen with a pair of beautiful eyes. As long as you take me to the Enlightenment rock wall, I won't kill him. Zhuowen frowned. Yarrow Yang's eyes flickered, and he sighed softly. Okay. I'll take you to the Enlightenment rock wall. However, you'll soon be known by the higher-ups of Shenzhen if you so brazenly break into the trial peak. At that time, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. You don't have to worry about that. I just want to go to the Enlightenment rock wall. Zhuowen said calmly. Seeing that Zhuowen was so stubborn, Yarrow Yang was helpless. He sighed and said, I'll take you there, but you can't make things difficult for us afterwards. Don't worry. If you take me to the Enlightenment rock wall, I won't hurt you. Zhuowen nodded and agreed. Then come with me. Yarrow Yang gritted his teeth and seemed to have made up his mind. He got up and walked towards the exit on the other side of the stone hall. Zhuowen followed closely behind. Yarrow Zuiling and the other 8 core disciples followed behind Zhuowen with fear in their eyes. They kept a certain distance from the latter. The strength that Zhuowen had displayed just now made them feel a lingering fear. How could they get close to this demon in front of them? While Yarrow Yang was leading Zhuowen to the Enlightenment Cliff, the left and right protectors, as well as the 10 great elders, were standing respectfully in a grand hall at the peak of the Sacred Master Mountain. At that moment, there was a stone statue flickering with golden light at the front of the hall. The left and right protectors, as well as the 10 great elders, were respectfully kneeling towards the stone statue. It was a rather strange sight. Catcher. The stone statue suddenly shattered and a magnificent and imposing figure walked out. This person had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He had thick eyebrows and large eyes. His expression was solemn and his eyes contained a flowing golden light. Lord Sacred Master. When this person appeared, the left and right protectors and the 10 great elders all prostrated themselves on the ground and bowed piously. This man's identity was obvious. He was the master of Shenzhen. I have a general understanding of the matter that you have reported. That young man has indeed infiltrated our Shenzhen. Just now, I sensed that 2 of the guardian elders of the trial peak have died. I'm afraid that it was done by that young man. The Sacred Master's voice was not loud, but it was extremely majestic. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear it. What? He actually dared to barge into the smelting trial peak and even killed 2 guardian elders. This brat was simply too arrogant. Sacred Master, this kid must be captured and severely punished. Hearing this news, the left and right protectors and the 10 great elders were all shocked. Their faces revealed a mixture of shock and anger. Zhuowen was too despicable. It was fine if he had infiltrated their Shenzhen, but he actually dared to kill their Shenzhen's people. Yes, this kid really needs to be severely punished. Let's go to the trial peak first and see what this kid's motive is for infiltrating our Shenzhen. The Sacred Master's voice was very indifferent. It was impossible to tell what his emotions were. Lord Sacred Master is right. Let's go to the trial peak now. We must completely capture this arrogant kid. As he spoke, the Sacred Master led the left and right protectors and left the Sacred Master's peak. They flew through the air and flew towards the trial peak in the distance. Zhuowen silently followed behind Yarrow Yang. However, his eyes were constantly paying attention to his surroundings. The trial peak's terrain was extremely steep. Other than cliffs, there were steep slopes. The road was extremely bad. Moreover, along the way, there were very few people. It seemed that other than the 10 great core disciples, there were basically no other disciples on the trial peak. Perhaps it was because he noticed the puzzled look on Zhuowen's face. Yarrow Yang took the initiative to speak. Don't be puzzled. As the name suggests, the trial peak is used to train the sect's disciples. However, the trial peak is a major event within the sect. It only happens a few times a year. Only then will there be a sea of people and the sect's disciples come to train. Usually, only us core disciples train on this peak. The other disciples do not have the qualifications to enter. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of relief. Soon after, he continued to silently follow behind Yarrow Yang. Seeing that Zhuowen did not speak, Yarrow Yang naturally did not ask for a rebuff. He also calmly led the way in front. Not long after, the group passed through a dark tunnel and arrived at the edge of a cliff. On the opposite side of the cliff, there was an extremely smooth rock wall. On the opposite side of the cliff is the Enlightenment rock wall. You can use the iron chain bridge to enter the cave on the opposite side of the Enlightenment rock wall. Inside there, you can greatly increase your comprehension ability. It is an important place in Shenzhen. Yarrow Yang stretched out his right hand and pointed at the edge of the cliff in front of them. There was a cold iron chain as he spoke indifferently. Zhuowen looked over and indeed discovered that on the opposite side of the iron chain was a cave that was half the height of a person. It looked ethereal and mysterious. Boom. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,